European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham. It's Friday, ladies and gentlemen. We have reached the end of yet another incredible week of news. I have to say, incredibly busy every single day this week. I can't even remember what some of the stories have been, but we launched yesterday a bit of a campaign about the state of our nation, the state of Britain, we're calling it, because for some reason, fly tipping is on the increase, bin collection is on the decrease, there's rats running around the size of cats in Birmingham, the bin men have gone on strike because they're so worried about getting bitten to death, and so we're going to ask you again today to continue with that, because we're not sure what we're going to do about it, but what I think we're going to do is we're going to collate all the pictures that you sent in. You were very good to send in loads of pictures yesterday of the rubbish-strewn streets wherever you live, and I must say we've got hundreds of them now, and we're collating them all together. We're thinking about doing a little mini documentary. We're not sure exactly how it's going to go, but if you've got pictures that you can send in to us, you know what to do. You can send them in to our WhatsApp number, 03444991000. That's the same place you can leave a voice note. But let's keep it going, because, you know, we should be proud of our country. We should be proud of how it looks. We should be proud of the fact that people come here from all over the world to visit it, and they really deserve to see something other than piles and piles of black bin bags and rodents thrown around. Don't you think? 03444991000. Charlie Rhodey's here. Very good morning to you, Charlie, former number 10 advisor, of course. We've got plenty to talk about this morning, because yesterday Keir Starmer decided it was a great idea to fire 10,000 people from the NHS. Now, he may well have something to say about that. He may well be right about that. But my question would be this. If you can fire 10,000 people from the NHS, what exactly are they doing? And why are they still working there now? And what are you going to do with them? And are you really going to fire them? Because let's face it, the unions have got the NHS by the short and curlies, if you'll pardon the expression. And what on earth union is going to agree to letting go that many people? We shall see. There's no question, though. He wants to do away with NHS England. I would just do away with the whole thing and sack all of them and start again. Coming up, we're also going to be talking about the Sentencing Council and the two-tier justice system. Apparently, they're going to back down after Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, told them that they can't start sentencing people based on whether they're black or trans or lesbian or one-legged or whatever it is. You know, the point is everybody going to be treated the same, which is a good thing. Meanwhile, of course, MEPs over in Brussels have been taking bribes from Huawei. Apparently, allegedly. Well, that doesn't surprise me at all. The Brussels Brigade, I'm afraid, are completely and utterly corrupt, always have been, always will be. I think we're still waiting for their first ever audited report from the Accounts Department. So, what does that say about them? Ed Miliband, he's off to China. I don't know why, but he's certainly going to be increasing his carbon footprint. He thinks he's going to try and form some kind of alliance with the Green Brigade over there. Also, you can apparently cure your headache by watching nature programmes. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. 0344 499 1000. If you've forgotten how to get in touch, here's how to do it.
Morning, Mike. John from Derbyshire here.
Hi, Mike. It's Kim here.
Hi, Mike. David in Portsmouth. Great show as always.
Hi, Mike. I love your show so much.
Mike, Tony from Nottingham.
Morning, Mike. Mike from High Wycombe. Lovely to listen.
Good morning, Michael. Always good to have a spot of Mike Graham in the morning.
Indeed. Also, there's a United Nations judge who's been found guilty of keeping a slave. Not quite sure what you want to say about that. They've given a premiere to the new woke version of Snow White. Nobody went. And that's the new way of doing woke movies, I suppose. And also, you can say numpty in the office. I don't know what your favourite insult is, Charlie, but we'll come round to that. But apparently you can call people numpties. This is a decision that's been made by an employment tribunal. Numpty is not a racial insult, and it is not based on any disability, so you can call people that whatever you like. I'm frightened of asking you what you like to call people who you don't like, because I think that would probably go horribly wrong. So whatever you do, don't send me any messages like that. 0344 499 1000. Also, it's Gaff Prone Friday, so we'll have a few of those as well. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Also, apropos of nothing at all, I saw a story last night which shocked me slightly, and you'll be able to tell me this. You might be the expert in the tea and biscuits scenario inside of the powers of the corridors of power. David Lammy launched his much vaunted UK Soft Power Council in January. So far, a parliamentary question has revealed that £20,000 has been spent basically on biscuits.
Well,
I mean, that's a lot of biscuits.
That's an awful lot of biscuits.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Only 7,000 on tea and biscuits. Oh, right. They've got a £20,000. They've got a £20,000 budget. They spent £7,000 on tea and biscuits.
Well, that's interesting. But what is interesting, I've actually just finished reading a book. This is a totally pointless thing to say, I suppose. But was it the Ramsay MacDonald government that was that fell in 1924 because there was a bit of a...
Was there? I'm not an expert on the Ramsay MacDonald government.
I think there was. I think the biscuits gave too much to the Prime Minister at the time. And that was a massive scandal.
How does it work? Because people will be interested in this. I mean, if you're sitting in Downing Street as an apparatchik, as an aide of some kind, and you want to buy something, or you want to get some stationery, or do you just walk to a cupboard and get it, or do you have to order it, requisition it, somebody signs it?
Well, there's supposed to be...
If you want a packet of biscuits...
If you want a packet of biscuits, there's supposed to be someone in HR, sort of part of a business unit, partnered with every department, that will do all the sort of, the admin or sort of the pens and pencils. But
it's not like the army where you go, like, I need a hammer, and they go, yeah, that'll be 42 quid.
Yeah, no. Someone somewhere just goes and gets it, and you can sometimes say, well, we want some nicer biscuits maybe for this meeting because we've got a nicer delegation.
Some Garibaldis.
Some Garibaldis as opposed to plain
ginger
cheese.
Nuts. What about if you want to go down to your local Tesco's and bring back some wine in a suitcase? I mean, they've been doing that, of course, during the Boris Johnson time.
Yeah, exactly, yes. Yeah,
presumably that was their own money when they were doing that.
I would imagine so, yes. Yeah, I can't imagine. It depends who's taking part.
You see, you get a glimpse behind the scenes with this show. This is what it is. Let's have a look at Keir Starmer from yesterday. He's abolishing NHS England. That's what he says. I've not yet met anyone who believes a word of this story, by the way, because the idea that Keir Starmer's is sort of going to sack up to 10,000 people who are probably members of a union, I would imagine. But let's have a look at what he had to say.
The NHS should be taken by an arm's-length body, NHS England. And I can't, in all honesty, explain to the British people why they should spend their money on 2 layers of bureaucracy. So today I can announce we're going to cut bureaucracy across the state, focus government on the priorities of working people, shift money to the front line. So I'm bringing management of the NHS back into democratic control by abolishing the arm's-length body NHS England.
So who's going to control it now, then?
Well, that's the big question.
He says democratic control. There's a piece in the Mail, I think, written by Professor Karol Sikora, who's a good friend of ours, and he seems to think that this might be a good idea. I think the question is, I suppose, it depends on how it's done. He says, not a single person on the front line will shed a tear for the abolition of this bureaucratic folly. But if they've literally hired 10,000 people, and I don't blame Labour or the Tories, whoever did it, if they found 10,000 people to just be sort of admin managers or whatever it is, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah, I think it's huge questions there, and obviously it's lasted, I think, since the Tories have brought in the new reforms in 2012 under Andrew Lansley. So this was a whole top-down reorganisation of the NHS, which nobody, once you do one big reorganisation of the NHS, you don't want to tinker with it, you don't want to break it up again. But I think the proposals on the surface actually seem quite good, but that is the question. If you've got 10,000 people extra that are doing really not very much, they're going to end up back in the system doing something else that's not very much.
Because whenever they... I mean, it's like yesterday it was revealed that they talk about getting rid of quangos, and this is sort of the biggest quango of all, isn't it? This NHS England quango. But it turns out that they've actually started up 27 different quangos since they've been in government last July. So they're not actually all about... And the bonfire of the quangos that everybody always says never turns out to be a bonfire of the quangos.
Exactly. And what happens, I think, particularly with NHS England, it was supposed to be a sort of a blanket or a cover for hospitals right up and down the country and clinical commissioning groups and services. So if there's a problem, you report into NHS England that can then sort of try and help with the actual medical side of things. But that would be then the reporting into the Department for Health. What we're going to have now is, hopefully, once that's abolished, and not duplicating work that's doing with the Department for Health and Public Health England itself, it will then be able to report directly to the Department for Health. But the problem with that is that people don't like to admit mistakes. No. Like, nobody in the department will say, boss, we've got a real problem here in mid-staffs. So
just cover it up.
There's now going to be more questions about it. Will there be more cover-ups?
Yeah. Over the course of its 12-year existence, this is from Karol Sikora's piece in the Mail, over the course of its 12-year existence, NHS England became an almost impenetrable, bloated bureaucratic shroud beneath which the NHS itself became utterly buried. As for arm's-length decisions, that phrase suggests some connection with the organisation it serves. In fact, whenever I visited NHS England's rather grand and popular South London offices, their headquarters are in Leeds, by the way, I was always struck by how entirely disconnected it felt, both literally and metaphorically, from the hospitals it was meant to oversee. It was rather like being inside a railway signal box with a dashboard showing rows of impressive shiny levers, only to find that when you pull one, they're not connected to anything. Yeah,
exactly.
Which is kind of an interesting, comparison. And he said this sense was only enhanced when, on one occasion, I had a 5 p.m. appointment to see the medical director to talk about cancer services, only to find I could barely get through the front door because of all the clock watchers running out to get home. So, I mean, it's sort of like, sounds as though these people are not medical people. They're kind of civil servants of one kind or another who are kind of box-ticking and making sure that the diversity, targets are being met. And I presume those are the kind of people we're talking about here.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you're a chief executive of a hospital somewhere right across the country, you would then be reporting into this NHS England, who would then be trying to sort of say, well, we've got budgets, we'll talk to the Department for Health and we'll try and get you this, but you've got to be, doing X, Y, Z, you've got to be ticking these boxes as well. So all the pressure on actual hospitals was coming from NHS England that was reporting into the Department of Health anyway, which a chief executive of a hospital just wants to be able to talk to the health secretary.
Yeah, exactly.
You would have thought if there's a problem.
Well, you would think. I mean, it's not that many health trusts, are there?
No.
I mean, it's probably, what, I don't know, maximum 20 or something in England?
Yeah, because they'll be regional. Yeah, exactly. And so
NHS England says it oversees the day-to-day operation of the NHS in England. Well, that doesn't work, does it? I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine just this morning, saying that, and she's got a son who's got a sports injury, sort of smashed his knee up playing football. He needs to have an operation, and they said, well, we could probably do it in about a year.
Yeah.
And I mean, he needs to be able to. He can't walk around. He needs the operation, but they can't do it. So she's going, well, we'll probably have to go private.
Yeah, totally.
Because that's what most people's experience with the NHS now is.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting, just from another sort of behind-the-scenes take, I suppose. I remember during COVID, you would have coming up to 5 years of COVID, the first lockdown. Ministers day after day going out to do those press conferences to say how many people have got COVID, how many hospital infections there were, and all the rest of it. But Public Health England would have a number of hospitalisations. The Department for Health would have a completely different number, and NHS England would pop up and say, well, actually, no, we've got the data from the hospital.
So is Public Health England still there as well, then?
I think that will still be there, and I think Public Health England will try and be the sort of policy arm of, so you go and develop smoking strategies, sexual health strategies, obesity strategies, whatever it is, but the Department of Health will actually be
So if you're waking up, I'd love to hear from some nurses. I know they listen to this show, and some doctors as well. Because if you're waking up this morning and you're working in the NHS, how is your life going to change as a result of this abolition of NHS England? I don't really get it. Let's see what Wes Streeting explains about it.
Always very frank with me and very clear. You were wrong when you said you don't need top-down reorganisation.
Yeah, I didn't anticipate coming in wanting to make this change to NHS England. It wasn't on my list of priorities. But I recognise that in order to achieve the change I want to, this is a necessary step.
He realised it after he was told by Keir Starmer, this is what we're going to do. Which also, funnily enough, Christian was pointing out to me this morning, is probably only really happening because Donald Trump is in the White House in America, because he has obviously been slashing and burning all sorts of, ridiculous organisations and denuding them of people and firing loads of people because they don't do anything.
Yeah, exactly. And, when you've got, a party like Reform that has said that it's going to come in and do this because, it wants to sort of change the way that this country's wired, because we've got too many people being paid in being paid too much in too high-paid jobs that don't actually do anything, that don't benefit the public. When the NHS isn't functioning properly, you've got to take the axe to it. You've got to slash jobs.
I mean, Starmer's so confused now that he's actually more right-wing than Rishi Sunak was, isn't he?
Yeah,
and he's more right-wing than any Conservative Prime Minister, really, since probably Margaret Thatcher.
Well, if you take exactly this, the cutting to the NHS and reorganisation of that, as well as cutting the benefits bill, getting rid of the wokery, people are suddenly realising that maybe, what we knew all along, Keir Starmer isn't political. He doesn't have a political bone in his body, but he's going with what he clearly thinks is popular and what the public want. And so therefore, to credit to him, to a certain extent, I won't get too carried away, he might be taking on his own party.
You've fallen for your own spin, though, haven't you? Because you're giving him credit for something he hasn't done yet.
Well, quite, exactly.
And that's the problem. This is the trouble with the media, and I'm not blaming you for this, but the media these days, they all go, oh, this is a good idea. What a brilliant, fantastic Prime Minister we've got. Look at how well he's doing. And when he went off to Trump and in the White House, and marvellous, look at him straddling the world, making peace happen. Well, none of it's happening because nothing has happened, and that's the problem. I think people are going a bit early with all this stuff.
No, I think you're absolutely right now, because I think the last time I was here, it was the meeting of the European leaders he brought together at Lancaster House. I think
what a waste of time that was.
It's come to nothing.
Well, I mean, the thing was, he made a great big speech that day and said, I'm absolutely committed to continuing the aid to Ukraine for as long as it takes. And then the next night, he has a conversation with Donald Trump. He doesn't bother to tell him he's actually pulling the aid altogether.
Yes.
So he was really not at the heart of the conversation there. But according to the Telegraph, they're calling it an £800 million gamble. And he says it's necessary to scrap the Quango in charge of running the health service, to redirect hundreds of millions of pounds to the front line and cut waiting lists. Because again, do you remember a few weeks ago they said that they'd managed to cut, or they'd managed to get 2 million more appointments than the previous year? Then it turned out they were comparing the previous year time period when the NHS was on strike. And then it turned out that many of the new appointments were simply diagnostic centre appointments because they decided to open them up on a Saturday and Sunday. Now, obviously, that's something good, but it wasn't quite what they were selling it as. They were selling it as, we're getting to grips with the waiting lists, but they're not really.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where the public become hugely sceptical of governments when they try and compare apples and pears, and you're comparing two different time zone scales, two different situations, and the public start to see through that quite quickly, I think, and that's what breaks down trust when you start to say, oh, we've delivered on the back of this. Well, hold on. There was other impacts that
you can't, and he keeps saying, and he keeps putting out these tweets that suggest that he's putting money back into people's pockets, and he just isn't. You can't keep saying that you're doing something if you're not doing it. People will get fed up. Got one from Andy in Notts, I think, which I've got to read out to you. This is very good. It says, when Keith Stalin was making his speech yesterday, he was backed by rows of people, all of whom look like they've just been told they've only got an hour to live. I've never seen such a bunch of miserable numpties in my life. But then again, they were listening to him making a speech, so that's explained. And of course, he made reference to his sleeves being rolled up. This is another sort of political trick, isn't it? That all prime ministers, if they want to look like they're doing something, take off your jacket, roll up your sleeves a little bit. But he didn't roll them up far enough, in my view. He should have been rolled up to the elbow to make it look, properly convincing. And he sort of struts around, trying to make out that he's. And they always, I mean, you'll know this better than me. They always arrange these things with a sort of a friendly crowd, don't they? They don't want anybody sort of shouting at him or heckling him.
Yes, well, we'll have to get in touch with Lord Ali to get him some new shirts that go up that
or
roll
maybe
up all the way.
I mean, a short-sleeved sort of coach driver look,
something more fitting.
Summer holiday time. Yes, absolutely right. Listen, we've got lots more to talk about, and thank you for all of your messages coming in already. We've got a voice note from James to kick us off on migrants.
Good morning, Mike. Look, the country's up the girdle at the moment, Mike. You've got illegal immigrants coming over here getting free driving lessons now, free hotels, free dental care. Why do we bother going to work, Mike? You go to work to better yourself. Oh, unbelievable. Cheers, Mike. Have a great weekend, mate.
James, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, this is a story that Kevin O'Sullivan discovered on his show, I think last night or the night before. Liam from Folkestone rang in to say they're now giving driving lessons to migrants who have come illegally to this country. And you're kind of going, you know, I mean, I happen to know this because my own son just passed his test. Very difficult to get driving lessons in the southeast of England. Very difficult to get a test in the southeast of England. And now we know why. Because they're giving them all away to these guys.
Yeah, exactly. And,
shocking.
And that's on top of, you know, integration, sort of trips to the zoo and to football matches and, and all the rest of it to try and integrate into society.
I actually came up with a great idea when we were doing a podcast yesterday. We'd take them to the zoo and just leave them there, lock them in, to, you know, in the cages. I mean, how bad would that be?
Well, I mean,
obviously there might be some
legal
some legal problems, but you know, what's that over there? That's a lion. Oh Christ! You know.
Well, they might self-identify. You never know.
They might do as llamas. You know. And one from Mel who says, "Morning, Mike. Please make my day by confirming that Ed Miliband's ticket to China is one way." Yeah, but I don't actually know why he's going to China, but we'll look into that and find out. It's 6:20. Charlie Rowley's here. We've got much more to do, including talking about the situation going on with Vladimir Putin. He's on a lot of the front pages. And also the hybrid car ban is going to be relaxed, apparently. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 24 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham with you for 4 glorious hours every single weekday morning from 6 until 10. Coming up at 10, Alex Phillips, of course. Charlie Rowley's here with me. This from Natasha. It says, it doesn't matter what Starmer does, even if it seems right-wing, he is culturally destroying my country and safety by not controlling the borders. Well, that is a massive problem. Let's get a voice note from Judith.
Good morning, it's Judy from Altoffs, West Yorkshire. We're streeting and the Prime Minister said they're going to get rid of NHS England. They won't. They'll just move it sideways and call it another name. I worked in the NHS for over 25 years and it wastes money on an industrial scale and nobody ever gets made redundant. Nobody. They get moved sideways and given a posher name, and that's all there is to it. Thank you.
Judith, very, very helpful. Thank you very much indeed for that. Judith's a very sensible woman. She sends us voice notes on a regular basis. I mean, this is the truth, isn't it? I mean, it's a huge organisation. I mean, even to do anything to it which would have any kind of impact in the short term is almost impossible to turn around in a short space of time, isn't it? I mean, by the time a lot of this stuff will get done, the Labour government might well be out of power.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And those people who are supposedly earmarked of the jobs cut will be spending time now applying for other jobs, probably within the NHS.
Within the NHS.
Or the Department of Health.
Right.
And that'll distract, actually, from getting on with cutting waiting lists.
Because they'll say we're going to get rid of all the wokery, but, I mean, every single week you can easily just go and look up in the pages of The Guardian, you know, and find some NHS wokery, you know, DEI jobs, you know.
Things can't be that bad.
Diversity.
Look at The Guardian.
I always look at The Guardian, it cheers me up. It's so bad. It's absolute rubbish. I see they had to pay out quite a lot of money as well the other day to Douglas Murray.
Indeed, yes.
Which was always welcome to see.
He's a great man.
Let's get some facts on Ed Miliband. Yes, apparently Ed Miliband's off to China for 3 days of talks with the Chinese. This is part of the resetting of our relationship with China. Not quite sure what he means by that. But basically, 3 days of talks with senior Chinese officials in the lead-up to the critical COP30 meeting in Brazil, which is in November. And funnily enough, on that subject, there's a piece in the Mail today about the staggering hypocrisy of all these COP climate jamborees. Ross Clark's written a piece. They're cutting a VIP highway through virgin Amazon rainforest in order to make sure that the celebrities and the VIPs can get to the climate summit in the middle of the Amazon quickly. But they're destroying trees to do it. I mean, how does that in any world make sense to a climate specialist?
Exactly. And when you're trying to appeal to the public to say we need to be more thoughtful about climate change and our energy efficiency, and we need these big summits and they need to take place because as a global community we're going to make these drastic changes that are going to benefit us all. When you then see things like this in the paper, you think, how bonkers is it? On, you know, however many, they're all taking different planes. They're cutting through the Amazon rainforest, going off to China. You know, what is the point talking to China? They are the biggest emitters in the world.
Exactly. And apparently because America and Trump have pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, you know, Miliband's trying to cozy up to China because he thinks that's the way forward. I mean, what sort of an idiot is he? Well, you don't even have to answer that. I mean, look, the guy just has no clue. And this is the third cabinet minister as well, by the way, who's been to China in the 8 months that they've been in government, which tells you where their priorities lie, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And look, you know, you've got to get the balance between national security with China and do trade with China because they are the world's second largest economy. But you don't need to, you know, as you say, the third minister going over there, you don't need to send 3. I mean, why couldn't they all gone together?
Well, exactly.
That might have, you know, helped reduce our emissions.
You know,
if that's what
why go at all? Why don't you just do it on Zoom? You know, that's what we're all told to do. You know, meanwhile, on the front page of the business section of the Daily Telegraph, it says a planned ban on hybrid cars is to be relaxed amid warnings that electric vehicle sales targets are squeezing manufacturers too tightly. And these are the sorts of statements that I find incredibly ridiculous, right? Because it's soon going to become illegal to sell a petrol and diesel car. You know, I mean, it should be illegal to shoplift. It should be illegal to, you know, attack people in the street. It shouldn't be illegal to drive a petrol car. It's ridiculous.
And that's exactly where I think this Labour government are going to come unstuck, because you've got the stories that we just talked about, as you say, Ed Miliband, you know, hell-bent on going over to China to try and laud it up as the big sort of eco-czar that he is. At the same time, as you say, cutting the Amazon rainforest, at the same time as telling ordinary people that they've got to change their car, or you can't have a petrol and diesel car, or you're impacting on the manufacturers of these particular vehicles because they've got to shut up shop. You're impacting on hard-working people, plus this GB Energy, whatever that is. Where's that?
Oh, God.
And
well, that's Jürgen's outfit, isn't it? Remember Jürgen Meyer, who's only been interviewed once. He was interviewed by a guy from Sky up in Scotland. And he doesn't have an office. He doesn't have he might have a car, I don't know, probably an electric car. He doesn't have any energy to sell. He's not buying any energy. He's not producing any energy. We're not really sure what he's doing. Doesn't appear to have any employees. They haven't even got a website.
No, exactly. And this is...
What's he doing?
And this
Jürgen, come on.
Where are you? But this was all Labour's great fanfare coming into office to say, we're going to create GB energy. And this is all under Ed Miliband. And I think it's all falling apart. So I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it would make my day, and I'm sure many other of your listeners' day, if they were to discover that in a supposed reshuffle that may or may not be coming in the summer, that Ed Miliband may or may not be moved on.
It's like one of those football matches, and I know you're not necessarily a football man, where they they come out for the second half and they've completely transformed the entire team and just brought a whole new bunch of players on to see if they can do any better. Because you have to say, I mean, you've got Jonathan Reynolds now, who admitted in Parliament this week that it's been brought to my attention I may have been a complete and utter liar. Sorry about that. Inadvertently, he told everyone he was a solicitor when he wasn't. Rachel Reeves, who's still struggling with her economy and the budget, which is going to be another disaster at the end of March. We've got, who else have we got? Angela Rayner, who's not building any houses at all, despite the fact she's promised to do so. Wes Streeting now doing things that he said he wouldn't do with the NHS, slashing 10,000 jobs. I mean, I don't think there's one cabinet minister that you can say is doing anything worthwhile.
No. And Liz, whatever her name is in DWP, that's got this balloon.
Oh, Liz Kendall,
Liz Kendall, that's
she's going to be one that cuts all the welfare jobs. Actually, that's a good story because we've got that here, I think, in the Telegraph. More than fivefold is the increase in the number of people who are too sick to work. About 1.8 million people are now on the highest rate of universal credit with no support to look for work, compared with just 360,000 in 2020. That's extraordinary. So in 5 years, it's gone up 5 times.
Exactly. And that's
so it's doubled every year, I suppose, that means, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course that was during COVID, so, you know, the Conservatives will say, well, look, you know, we had to sort of protect people's jobs and their jobs and all this, but, you know, someone clearly over that period has taken their eye off the ball and thought, hang on, you know, we've
but
got
of course they didn't protect everybody's jobs because there were lots of people's jobs that weren't protected. You know, the people that were delivering things, for example, the people that were, you know, driving trains, the people that were doing things that they couldn't do from home. We're still going to work. I mean, I've been seeing, I don't know about you, but over the course of the last week or so on social media, some of the horrendous things that people were doing, which I'd completely forgotten about. Like they had somebody put out a little video clip of these people dancing in the street, but just outside their own houses. And sort of, you know, waving to each other. And you're kind of going, that looks really weird. Actually, that looks insane. What the hell are you thinking of, you know? It's just incredible what people did. I mean, I've told this story before. For 8 weeks, I didn't see my own children in Sussex because I wasn't sure if I went there, whether I'd not be able to get back or there'd be some police roadblock or something like that. I mean, it was just really odd, wasn't it? Yeah, it was it was an odd, bizarre, tragic, difficult time for everybody, and you know, ultimately you're being guided by people who clearly didn't know everything about it. They were moving at pace. They didn't know anything about it.
Really?
No. I mean, they were literally just poking around in the dark, going, "Oh well, we better shut everything down."
Yes, yeah. You know? And there were far too many people who, by the way, were, you know, and I was part there, I was there at the time, but you know, you were surrounded by a group of people that were turning up to work every day. So for them, it was a normality. Turning up to the office, okay, you had certain things in to you know, not be sitting
But again,
next to
I mean, I was the same. I came into work every single day. We didn't hang around. You know, I would come in, my producer, we'd do the show, we'd go. And so there was no kind of socialising or anything like that. And people came into the office fitfully. A lot of people did the radio shows from home because you know, they preferred to do it that way. But it was just a very strange time, and it now turns out that almost every precaution that was taken wasn't necessary. Yeah, exactly. And what was the biggest thing for me is that you know, you can focus on what I kind of touched on earlier, is the numbers of infections and hospitalisations, and those numbers were great. And of course, again, you know, give the NHS what it needs to. But there are so many numbers of people that weren't even concluded. So how many thousands of kids that actually weren't going to school? What is the mitigation for that? How many millions of people that weren't able to go to work? Why are we not thinking about them? There was just a fixation on the numbers of people that were obviously getting COVID and diagnosed, and of course you've got to deal with that. You know, but is it okay to say to a society that you can't turn up to your mother's funeral or go to a care home? No, I just don't think it is. I don't think that was right. And it certainly wasn't justifiable. And I mean, nobody's going to try and diminish the sad losses that people felt in their families, and people, particularly elderly people who died. But 95% of people, probably higher than that, of the people who got COVID didn't die. Yes, yeah. And once you had a vaccine, and once, you know, things, you know, and you've got to, at some point, give people, individuals, the option to say, you know, you can't. But then the vaccine stuff was mad as well, because, you know, everybody from Piers Morgan to whoever else you might want to mention in the government saying, oh, well, now you take the vaccine, now it'll stop you getting COVID. It didn't. It'll stop you passing it on. It won't. You know, and so, yeah, it was good that people got it, but those people who didn't get it didn't appear to suffer too much either. I mean, it's the whole kind of the whole nonsense of government in that time was so bizarre.
Yes, yes.
That you just don't ever want to go back to it.
No, and it was driven by, dare we say, health officials, public health officials, that where hopefully a big quango now has been abolished, that we might actually get that balance again.
Can we get rid
between
of Chris
health
Whitty
and
now as part of this, revamping of NHS England? Because I think a lot of people would quite like to see the back of him. Just for old time's sake, we might as well do this because it's Friday, it's Gaff Friday. Jonathan Reynolds, we played him out earlier in the week. Let's play him out again, correcting the record.
I made a reference to my experience of using our local transport system in Greater Manchester when I worked as a solicitor in Manchester city centre. I should have made clear that specifically, Madam Deputy Speaker, that was a reference at the time to being a trainee solicitor. I would like to formally correct the record.
Yeah, at the time you were a trainee solicitor, there was never a time when you were a solicitor. He's still saying it when I was a solicitor in Manchester. He was never a solicitor in Manchester. He was only ever a trainee solicitor. And it's only come to his attention now that he managed to get that wrong. He said it 10 years ago, he said it.
And I think he said it repeatedly in other conferences and other events.
He did, and he had it in his CV, exactly. He had it in his LinkedIn profile, and also Luke Johnson, the businessman, said that he once sat next to him at a dinner, at which he spoke completely and utterly about nothing other than the fact that he'd been a solicitor for about an hour.
Yes, yeah.
So he'd obviously practiced telling stories that weren't true.
Yeah.
Presumably.
Clearly this is something...
Very odd behaviour.
Yeah, exactly. And, people won't forget it, I don't think. The same with Rachel Reeves, you can't just embellish your CV. You can't go to the whole country and say, I would make a fantastic Chancellor because I worked at the Bank of England for 10 years. Well, you worked in, customer service.
For about 5 years.
And before that, you were somewhere just sort of taking customer service
complaints. Rachel from complaints. I've got some complaints, I can tell you. Let's get another voice now from Eric on NHS England.
Good morning, Mike. It's Eric from Leeds. You want to know about a waste of money? Well, in the centre of Leeds is the DWP building, or better known as the Kremlin to people from Leeds, where NHS England has offices. A friend of mine works there. The building's over half empty, and nobody comes to work. They're all working from home. We're talking billions of pounds worth of buildings sat there, practically empty, costing us an absolute fortune.
See, that's what's great about this show. We get information from people who are in the know. I love that. They call it the Kremlin, the world headquarters of the DWP, Department of Work and Pensions. And that's where NHS England are situated. But as he says, they're all working from home. I didn't even think about that. I'm sure that's true.
Yeah, probably, yes. Yeah, Kendall's Kremlin. Or the Kremlin Kendall.
Yeah, unbelievable, isn't it? Sean in Gloucester says this. Morning, Mike. Regarding crumbling Britain, where do you start? Potholes, broken NHS, rubbish overflowing, insane prices, incompetent government, wokeism, absent police unless you post hurty words on social media, women with penises, people with breasts. I could go on. We need a radical change. It's true. That's, of course, the St John's ambulance story this week, where they've decided it's not fair to call people women anymore. They're just going to call them people with breasts. So just remember that in case you ever need to be taken to hospital in an ambulance.
Noted. Well, apart from that list, it's all going incredibly well.
Yeah. Do you know what's really funny? I was watching Question Time last night for my sins. I don't normally watch it, but I thought I've got a spare hour, I'll have a look. It was so ridiculous because right near the end, Fiona Bruce said, we don't normally do this. We keep getting asked to do it, but we've decided today we are going to do it. And it's a question about, and I thought it was going to be about reform, because that's the big story of the week, which they didn't touch at all, by the way. And it turned out it was a question about potholes. And you've never seen anything like it. All the people from Fiona Bruce down to all the other people on the panel were all kind of slightly shifting around in their seats because it's almost as though, we don't really talk about this. This is a bit sort of down market for us. It's a bit low rent, oh my goodness me. And she said, and I've had to do some research to find out, do you know that there's I'm like, we've been doing potholes for about 10 years on this station, right? Because people care about it. And then they were sort of going, it's very surprising. And the woman from Labour, who we mentioned earlier,
Emma
she
Reynolds,
said, she said, yes, it's amazing. Whenever we go around door knocking people, they always mention potholes, almost as though there's some sort of alien concept to them, that people actually worry about things that damage their cars, kill cyclists, and ruin the roads of this country. And it's sort of revealing how uncomfortable they all felt talking about it.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Politics is local. It really is local, you know, because local authorities are supposed to be there, local councils that they're supposed to fill in the potholes, and need the money to do that. They run social care services, they run education, you know, so, but local issues really matter to people. And it's telling when you then see...
But it really tells you, but when you've got Fiona Bruce, you know, a senior BBC journalist who's also similarly baffled by the fact that people are talking about this.
Yes, well...
You know, they're not actually spending their time talking about, you know, the inside-outside, you know, tariff movement in the European Union. You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah. It's time for a gaff, I think. It is Friday, after all. We try and keep you amused and entertained for the 4 hours of genius that we provide for you every single day. Here's Kevin O'Sullivan interrupting a guest because he was bored.
The only country that hasn't legalised cannabis to any degree is this country, which is completely mad, as we have the highest number of drug deaths in Europe. So this report is going to... You're going to... Do you want to interrupt me?
No. I think
the report is going to... I mean, we've come to the, you know, the initial number of 1.5 billion.
He looks this pained expression on his face. Do you want? I mean, if somebody says you want to interrupt me, and that's when you interrupt them, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, surely you've been given a green light to interrupt them. They're on some really boring sort of treatise about something that nobody's interested in, and he doesn't go for it.
Yes,
extraordinary.
I think he probably zoned out before she, you know, to whatever she was talking about, the legalising whatever.
I know, absolutely. David says this on the NHS England story. Starmer is doing a doge to bring in the AI reset, just like Musk in America. They're pretending to be doing something in the interest of the public while swapping humans for AI. Well, interesting you say that, because we'll come back in a minute with a story that another one of Starmer's cabinet members has apparently been forming policy with using AI chatbots. Some people suggesting maybe they're cleverer than he is. Well, we'll tell you more about that at 6:40.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:43. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when Alex Phillips will be coming along. Plank of the Week coming out later on tonight as well. Charlie Rowley's here. We've been looking through some of the stories in the papers, and we'll have some gaps for you as well. An amazing story on the front of the Telegraph. The Science Secretary, Peter Kyle, who actually I've interviewed. He's one of the few cabinet ministers who's actually been on the show, and he's quite a good communicator, actually, is Peter Kyle. But he's now been accused of having not just responsibility for artificial intelligence. He's basically been asking AI chatbots for help with his policy making, which is probably not what he should be doing, really, is it?
No, and you wouldn't have thought so, no. But I suppose the only thing to his defence, as the technology secretary, you should be looking at kind of what technology can do. But you would be highly embarrassed surprised to find out that AI is a better,
that's right.
better proponent of coming up with ideas.
I mean, I suppose for those of us who are a bit Luddite about these things, because I don't really use chatbots at all, I don't know whether you do. I don't really feel the need to be honest. I don't really see why you would, but certainly my kids use them, and you know, other people probably in this building use them. But we keep being told they're going to get better and better. You know, they will become, in the end, impossible not to use, I suppose. So maybe he's ahead of his time. Is he?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think he would want to admit that either. But he's because, you know, if you find out that these chatbots can sort of, I mean, they might be. Well, this is the thing. I think you're right, Mike. Here we go. Because I think I don't use chatbots now because I like the idea of creativity, and I think that we as a society can come up with ideas together as people.
Yes.
If you then start relying on technology, if they come up with more ideas or better ideas that you can't think of, then I think that just it shows that there's a dull Luddite sort of part of the civil service that are failing to do their job. You just need better civil servants. That's what you need.
One of the questions he asked the ChatGPT was, I'm Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology in the United Kingdom. What would be the best podcast for me to appear on to reach a wide audience that's appropriate for my ministerial responsibilities? Well, hasn't he got a SPAD that can tell him that? Well, you go to the office canteen and talk to somebody who works with him and go, you listening to any decent podcasts that I should maybe go on to talk about my ministerial responsibilities?
Yes, yeah, quite. But to be fair, I mean, I know this may be exposing my own sort of background, but I probably would have advised against going on specialist media. If you're the specialist, basically the minister for that, I think keep it more mainstream. You might not get asked the difficult questions.
Yes, exactly, because you might not be able to explain what they want to know. Exactly, because they actually recommend that he should go on the Infinite Monkey Cage, a science comedy series on BBC Radio 4, which I've never heard of, and The Naked Scientists, which doesn't sound appropriate at all.
No, I don't think we need to.
You should stay away from that. And Hampstead Heath, while you're at it. How about this from Stuart, who talks about another sort of, it's a migrant of the day we do here now. So this is it. Convicted Ghanaian criminal deported from Britain 12 years ago has been allowed to return under human rights laws because he is depressed. We are finished. We have to leave the ECHR. This is another one of these mad stories, right? This guy gets sent back to Ghana, but because he had to leave his family here, he's apparently been a bit depressed back in Ghana, even though that's where he comes from. And so now he's being allowed to move back to Britain. He was jailed and deported in 2013 for attempting to circumvent the Home Office leave to remain rules. He's a convicted fraudster. I mean, we don't really need him coming back.
No, and, you know, people will up and down the country be, again, up in arms to hear on the back of, you know, previous rulings about, you know, somebody not liking chicken nuggets or something.
Her son didn't like chicken nuggets, So my favourite, as I keep repeating, is the Nigerian psychopath, right, who apparently can't be sent back to Nigeria because he's possessed by the devil. And you're kind of going, right, okay then. It is laughable.
But the best legal brains in Britain is believing any of them.
I know.
Who are they?
And you go, righto, tick. You know, okay then. Yeah, I mean, here's how you should be doing it. This is Caroline Leavitt, I think, fast becoming one of everybody on this show's favourite people. She's, of course, the White House press secretary. There's a guy called Mahmoud Khalil who is being deported from America, even though he's got a green card, which means he's got, you know, settled status there, because he took part in a load of anti-Israel demonstrations, and he was involved in sort of some pro-Hamas demonstrations as well at Columbia University. Here's what she said.
Mahmoud Khalil was an individual who was given the privilege of coming to this country to study at one of our nation's finest universities and colleges. And he took advantage of that opportunity, of that privilege, by siding with terrorists, Hamas terrorists who have killed innocent men, women, and children. This is an individual who organized group protests that not only disrupted college campus classes and harassed Jewish American students and made them feel unsafe on their own college campus, but also distributed pro-Hamas propaganda, flyers with the logo of Hamas. That is what the behavior and activity that this individual engaged in. And I have those flyers on my desk. They were provided to me by the Department of Homeland Security. I thought about bringing them into this briefing room to share with all of you, but I didn't think it was worth the dignity of this room to bring that pro-Hamas propaganda. But that's what this individual distributed on the campus of Columbia University. And this administration is not going to tolerate individuals having the privilege of studying in our country and then siding with pro-terrorist organizations that have killed Americans. We have a zero-tolerance policy for siding with terrorists, period.
Isn't that brilliant?
Period.
You just want to get up and applaud, don't you?
Quite right.
I mean, that's exactly what we should be doing. We should be saying, look, you people, you're criminals, whatever the crime is that you've committed, it doesn't matter. You can't stay here. You know, it's hard to believe that you have to even explain that to anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And there are far too many people that, you know, will swan around, you know, media studios a bit like me, but not in the case of me, because they'll say, oh, well, you know, we have to open our arms to the whole world. OK, we will support
the
people.
downtrodden people. They're not downtrodden, they're bloody criminals.
And she's talking up what we never do in this country. It's a privilege to be in the United States. It's a privilege to come to the United Kingdom. It's a privilege to be in this country, to work, to live, to support, if you can raise a family, if you can make a contribution. But as soon as you break those rules, if you start doing exactly what this chap was doing, which is distributing Hamas, which is a prescribed term. In fact, our British Broadcast Corporation, the BBC, can't even come to terms with calling
They'd probably
Hamas
give them a job.
terrorists. Well, yes. Well, they
come in and be the Middle East editor.
They allow them to be the voiceover for documentaries.
Yeah, I know.
BBC these days,
Unbelievable.
and it is ridiculous. But she's absolutely right. That's the kind of language and the kind of decision making that we want to see in the UK. And fair play to her. Well done.
Absolutely right. Now, coming up, we've got to talk about the front page of The Sun, because there's a reason why Prince William has given an interview to The Sun. He's talking about football mostly, but I've got another reason as to why I think he's done it. This is Morning Glory. Back after this.
Of course, we all know in the UK that you can easily sit for 4, 5, 6 or more hours in A&E, and then at the end of that you may well end up on a trolley in a corridor. In Israel, it's a kind of it is a health insurance system, but those who don't earn anything, those who have no means, have it paid for them. So it's basically done according to what your means are, which is really just a different way of taxation.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way until 10 o'clock. It's 6:53. We'll have a look at the front page of The Sun now because they've got Cheltenham Gold Cup Day. Nigel Farage is going down, apparently, according to everybody who knows what his movements are. And it's always quite a big day out for a lot of people from London, isn't it, Cheltenham Gold Cup Day? I mean, you don't see an awful lot of politicians at the races, but I'm sure there'll be a few down there today. But the main story they've got on the front, Royal World exclusive, Why I Fell in Love with Villa, and it's an interview they've got with Prince William talking about Aston Villa and how he loved being taken to the football by friends as a boy. He says he was gripped by the sense of belonging and the passion of his fellow football fans. I'm not dissing Prince William here, but I don't know why he would belong in Birmingham, because that's not really anywhere near where he comes from, is it?
No.
Most people support a football team because they sort of grew up with it, and that's what he's saying, but I don't understand why it would be Aston Villa particularly.
Yes, yeah, well, there's a long-running joke that there are more Manchester United fans in the South East.
Well, I said this
in Manchester.
I said this when there was a bit of controversy about the building of the new Manchester United stadium, which apparently we may have to pay some of it for. And I said, well, why don't they just build it in Surrey, where all the fans are?
Yeah, exactly.
And that way you won't have to spend so much time travelling there.
Yes, and if you want to visit someone that resembles Bognor, or Butlins Bognor or Skinny, you
absolutely
right.
There,
but
I've got a theory that he hasn't just done this because he likes the Sun and he wants to talk about football, but also because Meghan is back in the news with her new show, with Love Meghan, and she's got a new podcast coming out, which is going to be called Confessions of a Female Founder with Meghan. And the cover of the podcast just has, she's like Madonna now. It's just one name, even though she complains that you can't call her Meghan Markle anymore, you have to call her Meghan Sussex. I know it's all a bit trivial, but it is Friday, so I make no apology for it.
I'm sure she's been called a few things, but
I'm sure.
I can't get over this. When you're a freelance sort of commentator or journalist, you sort of spend a lot of time at home sometimes looking at the walls.
Yes.
And I think I'd rather do that than listen to anything else.
I think so.
And I can't wait for Netflix, which inevitable, they're going to drop her at some point because she's not bringing the views, not bringing the listeners. Yeah. And she is, I'm sure she's a very, very good actress, and she's done.
She is a good actress, because everything she does is an act. There's no question about that.
Exactly.
In fact, we've got a clip. I'm sorry about this, but let's play the clip.
You see where our rainbow is coming together here? And you don't have to do a big platter of this. You could do this with one small row for your kids for breakfast, genuinely, and it makes the morning a lot more fun. But can I just show you if you just made one? Just a little morning plate. It's a real delight in being able to be a present parent. And it's a luxury sometimes because we all have to work. We all have a lot of stuff to do, but when you can take a minute to just...
Saturday morning.
Yeah. Finding the fun in those moments makes for a really sweet start to the weekend.
Yeah, because, as we've said before, everybody's got loads of time to make a sort of, rainbow arrangement of fruit for the kids. Jeremy Carl was saying, normally in his kids' kitchen there's food being thrown and kids' tantrums, kids falling over, screaming. I'll tell you what, it's also really good, and it's in the Mail, pictures of people at Cheltenham with disguised flasks. And there's a picture of a woman here drinking out of what looks like a hairbrush, but it's clearly not a hairbrush. It's obviously got a load of booze in it. And all I keep seeing as well is like fight scenes. There's videos being put up of people punching each other, and the women as well. But there's a woman. I think she's got binoculars.
Yes. The innovation of people now.
This is what I call proper British innovation. These are the people that should be running the NHS, right? Yeah. They're that clever. That would help amazingly well. But yeah, Prince William, why I fell in love with Villa. Then he talks about England as well. It was the hardest changing room atmosphere I've ever walked into. This was a Euro final defeat by when England lost, I think, to, was it France? No, it was Italy, wasn't it? So yeah, it's a big coup for the Sun to get like 6 pages of Prince William. But you can imagine poor old Meghan waking up to this morning, going, "They've done it again.
Yes,
they've done it again. They've knocked me off the front pages. It's an absolute travesty. Harry, what are you going to do about this? We must do something."
Yes, where are our PR people?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, they've all left.
They're
not working for us anymore.
They've all been fired. Absolutely. The other story we should talk about is the Sun's numpty story, page 25. Apparently, numpty is now an acceptable insult that you can use with gay abandon, because basically it's not discriminatory. It is not anything to do with race, nothing to do with disability. So It's a word that, and this is according to a judge, Richard Nicole, in an employment tribunal. The judge threw out his claim of race discrimination, harassment, disability discrimination, harassment, victimisation and whistle-blowing detriment. This is some guy called Sonny Callar who took offence at being called a numpty. I mean, who takes offence at being called a numpty?
Yeah, well, exactly. And am I right in thinking that he was a former police officer as well, or is
Yeah,
a
I think
police
so.
officer?
Yeah.
Which puts the whole thing into perspective, where you've got people that are being policed by horrible things that people might say on Twitter. And, you know, he took offence to just being called a numpty as a police officer. No wonder people are, you know, little old grannies are getting their door knocked at by coppers to say, well, you criticise the local Labour council.
And these are the sort of people they've got in the police, right? The numpty allegation was one of 271 allegations made by Mr. Callar. All of them were dismissed. 271 complaints about people calling him names.
Because of a heightened sense of sensitivity that he might have. Well, do you know what? Why don't you just focus on catching those shoplifters that you talked about earlier on? Why don't you actually go out there and catch the criminals that are
would be
actually
good.
blighting our Great Britain, rather than people that are might be calling you a numpty?
I know. And for those of you who are interested in historical references, apparently numpty dates from the 18th century and was once voted Scotland's favourite word.
Well, there you are.
There we are. Alan Brazil says it quite a lot as well. He's on breakfast, of course, at TalkSport. Charlie, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Have a great weekend. We will be here for the duration until 10 o'clock. Coming up, James Heal for The Spectator. We'll tell you more after the news.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 7. The sun is rising, ladies and gentlemen. If you're up and about, ready to take the kids to school or ready to get yourself off to work or ready just to work from home on a Friday and not bother going anywhere, welcome to Morning Glory. We're here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. James Hill, Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator, is going to be joining us very shortly. Lots and lots of you sending some great messages in about all manner of things. We're continuing to talk about the state of the nation because yesterday we sort of inadvertently launched a campaign which was to try and clean up the streets of our cities and our towns, and even not just the streets but the country roads where fly tipping has become a massive problem, and so we want to hear from you on this because many of you sent in incredible pictures, and you're looking at some of them now from various different points around the country: Coventry, Leeds, Bristol, Manchester, London, of course, the home counties, all the way down to Southampton, Exeter, Cornwall. You know, there's something going on in this country, and I don't know what we do about it, but I'm saying we should be proud of the nation, we should be proud of how it looks, and when people come to visit, they should not be greeted with the sight of rodents, foxes, rubbish all over the streets, and just a general sense of kind of decline, which is what it looks like to me. 0344 499 1000. If you've forgotten how to get in touch, have a listen to this.
Good morning, Mike. The country's up the girdle at the moment, Mike.
Morning, Mike. It's Matt from Doncaster. Another week, another madness.
Good morning, Mike. It's Eric from Leeds. You want to know about a waste of money? Well, in the centre of Leeds is the DWP building, or better known as the Kremlin to people from Leeds.
I mean, the Kremlin in Leeds, absolutely brilliant. That's, of course, the home of NHS England, which Keir Starmer yesterday abolished. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems like quite a broad, sweeping thing to do that. He says he's going to get rid of 9,500 people out of the NHS. Now, first of all, my question would be, well, what are they doing now? And how are they possibly ever working in a job where they can be just lost overnight in one fell swoop? But my suspicions are that they're not really going anywhere. We'll find out from James Hill what he thinks. Sickness epidemics have increased fivefold in 5 years. We've now got over 2 million people who are too sick to work, which is unbelievable. Donald Trump's threatening a 200% wine tariff on the EU. And that's got the winemakers over in France very, very worked up, of course, as well. We'll be talking about how you can cure your headache by a walk in nature. We'll also be talking about the hypocrisy of Ed Miliband going to China and an Amazon rainforest being destroyed in order to put a road in for COP30, the next climate conference, which is happening in Brazil in September. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about the Sentencing Council as well, two-tier justice. It's all going on. This is Morning Glory. Let's get on with it. Sorry. So a bit of breaking news again. I don't know why I'm laughing, because it's probably going to be a really, really bad week for everybody now. We haven't even had the Rachel Reeves March statement, right? That's coming in a couple of weeks' time, which they said they wouldn't ever do, which they're now doing. The UK economy contracted by 0.1% in January, and that's according to the Office for National Statistics. It just keeps kind of going beep, 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 beep. It goes up 0.1, down 1.1. Up 1 point, up, down 5 points. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Let's talk to James Hill and get his take on it. James, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
So, another fantastic piece of news for Rachel Reeves. The economy contracted by 0.1% in January. I mean, the trouble with these little tiny numbers is they're all kind of within, are they not, the margin of error. So it's kind of flatlining, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, flatlining is basically the whole story of this government. I mean, the past 8 months or so, we've really bobbled along, 0.1% in some sectors, 0.1% down in others. And really, I think this is being attributed to the fact that there's been a fall in the production sector. And I think the big backlash is going to be from the business sector, because they're saying, hang on a sec, you've given us the national insurance rise, you've made it very difficult with the employment rights bill that's currently going through Parliament, and I think that there's a real political opening right now for people like the Conservatives to say, hang on a sec, you've had a month, you had like the budget, you've had a long time in office, why aren't we seeing these figures getting turned around anytime soon then?
Yeah, exactly right. And they keep talking about growth as if they say it often enough, it will just happen. And it doesn't happen like that. And the same for Keir Starmer saying every single time he makes a statement on social media, we're putting money back into working people's pockets, except he's not.
Absolutely. And it's always like, I think the thing about Labour is that they haven't had that ability to realise how their actions have consequences, in that, you know, they had the first budget, which raised taxes by 38 billion, and that was obviously something that was held to choke off growth by the ONS, sorry, by the OBR, which Labour put so much stock into. So that was the first thing. And second of all, of course, you've got the Employment Rights Bill coming through Parliament, which the government's own independent regulator says is going to damage the economic prospectus. And so as a result of that, it's like, hang on a sec, you are taking responsibility. You're saying on the one hand, growth, 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 and your actions speak louder than words. Why are you not going to be reconciling the fact that your policies are clearly held to be damaging economically and actually do something about that?
Yeah, and her headroom for any sort of, fiscal wiggle, if you like, has completely gone, hasn't it? So, I mean, I think it's March the 26th, a couple of weeks from now. Yep. What is she actually going to say? What's she going to be able to give us in terms of any encouragement that the economy is going to improve?
I think that she's going to have to be talking about long-term consequences, and I think she's going to have to be talking about figures over the course of the whole Parliament. That's 2-3 years down the line. Now, you and I, Mike, know just how difficult it is to forecast accurately. So she's just got to hope that her Labour MPs are going to stick with the plan, and that actually she has a bit more wiggle room. There'll be all sorts of sort of Treasury tricks, etc., to ensure that she doesn't breach the headroom. And I'm sure she'll be able to get around it somehow. We saw that with the defence uplift 2 weeks ago. There isn't a fantastic new vast sum of money. It's predicated on higher economic growth and inflation. But of course, she was able to get away with that. So I do think that she'll find a way to get around it. But I mean, ultimately, Mike, she said no more tax rises. She's not coming back for more. She's insisted there's no return to austerity. You've got the bond markets very jittery about increased borrowing. I think it's going to be a very difficult next few months with a spending review March the 26th. And I think that the economy is going to be the big single issue over the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, interesting. What do you make of this NHS England story? Because the Mail is kind of suggesting that they're in favour of it. Finally, the headline says, patients to be put before NHS bureaucrats, 9,300 jobs to go. Telegraph calls it an £800 million gamble. I mean, the question I had this morning is, if you've got 9,500 people that you don't need, what on earth are they doing? And how did they come to be, if that's what's going on? We've had a caller already from Leeds who says that the Department for Work and Pensions building in Leeds, which is where NHS England is more or less completely empty because hardly anybody actually works from the office and they all work from home.
Well, I suspect we'll see many more of these kind of stories over the next few months as the government does make its case, continues to make its case to end duplication of jobs. I mean, the stories I was on, looking at the papers last night, and some of the unions were raising concerns about all of this. I mean, figure of 10,000 jobs, there are 1.3 million in NHS England. So this is only 0.76%. This is less than a percentage of all jobs going to go. And frankly, I think it's. I think I'm fairly agnostic about the question of do you bring the NHS England back into service, etc. The only thing I'd say, of course, is that by taking complete political control, there are no sort of deniability. There's no plausible deniability. The arm's length body is going, and so if the NHS improves, that'll be on the credit of West Streeting. But if it doesn't, and doesn't improve dramatically, given all those tax rises to pay for increased spending, the buck stops short and falls directly on West Streeting's shoulders.
But you make a good point. I mean, that was another question I had, was that if these people are unionised, there's no way he's going to be able to sack them, first of all. And a lot of people have said to me, because of the way they know how the NHS works, basically, it will be just a sort of rearranging of the chairs exercise, and they'll all end up in another department of the NHS somewhere else. But if they're not clinicians and they're basically management, I don't understand where they're going to go.
Well, Mike, I mean, you make a great point, which is that Labour are trying to keep the unions on side at the same time as shrinking the state. And I think that is a very difficult balancing act. It's notable that the rhetoric was all, oh, no, we're not having an expansionist state, we're having an active state. Well, what does that mean? And they were very determined to say that, they weren't going to cut any jobs. Actually, when it comes down to it, I suspect some jobs will be lost. And the key challenge for the Labour Party is, are you going to be a party of producer interests, of the unions, of the jobs, or are you about consumers? And are you actually going to improve the NHS in the interest of the people who pay for it, which are the taxpayers? So that is the big crunch coming, and we shall see if they have to fight for it.
Well, exactly right. And the other big crunch that's coming is obviously Liz Kendall's department, where they're going to try and somehow do something about the 1.8 million people who are now on the highest rate of universal credit. These are people who are considered too sick to work, which has gone up incredibly by fivefold since 2020, since the pandemic, effectively, increased by nearly 70% from autumn 2023.
I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it, Mike? We have seen an unprecedented increase in these kind of benefit spending. And I don't think a lot of Labour MPs appreciate how bad it is. I mean, a lot of them come from experiences where they've been working with the benefit sector, where they've maybe perhaps had friends or themselves have been on benefits at some point. And I think that their rhetoric is sometimes not frankly serious. I mean, I've done interviews with Labour MPs, etc., where they always tiptoe around the subject and say, this is going to be something that could potentially bankrupt the UK economy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That, the benefits bill is going to rise to 100 billion by the end of this parliament. No government could afford that, and so they have to get realistic about this. These figures are quadrupling. Are we 4 times sicker because of COVID, or are there actually gaps in the systems and things going wrong that we can fix?
Right.
And if Labour wants to make some savings, that's where to start.
And that's the thing, I mean, people are saying to me this morning, Keir Starmer's move against NHS England is almost like a right-wing Prime Minister from the Conservative Party of old, much more right-wing than anything Rishi Sunak did or that even Boris Johnson did, and certainly than Liz Truss did, because she didn't really have a chance to do very much at all. But I mean, if they're really going to crack down on welfare as well, and if they're going to be able to do that successfully, that's also going to be something that people would say, well, that's surely Conservative policy, isn't it?
I mean, I was there in the House of Commons yesterday, and Wes Streeting was there taunting the front bench, saying, we've also defence spending, getting rid of waste, things they could only dream of. And to be frank, that's where the centre ground of British politics, you want to call it the common ground, and that's where people will win elections, because they don't like waste and they like seeing public services being invested and looked after. And so I'm interested to see how the Conservatives respond to this. And you'll notice, actually, I think that the Tories have been a little bit umming and erring about whether to support the NHS England move or not, because they know that there are some merits to it, there's some arguments against it, but for right now they need to work out their attack lines.
Yeah, exactly. And more bad news for Labour as well. No appetite for their business loving, which is supposed to be a leaders' summit. £3,000 a ticket, and they can't sell them, not surprisingly.
Well, I mean, you'd think that a government with a huge majority, which is clearly going to be in power until 2029, would be able to attract more businesses. But I do think that these figures, and I believe that the sums, the number has increased from £3,000 a ticket for these business days to now £5,000, because they've got a whole new enhanced experience. Yeah. And a week after going on sale, there's still many tickets which are not yet sold out. And I think that that's because I think people are thinking about, in terms of the companies, which members of staff they send. I think chief executives went last year. I don't think the chief executives thought it was a waste of their time. Yeah. So I think there'll be less people who wanted to go. And frankly, I mean, the question is, Labour has a question of stated priorities versus revealed priorities. In opposition, they were talking about how wonderful they were going to do things. Actually, in office, I think a lot of businesses feel quite left in the cold and, quite irritated by how Labour's handled them.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm not quite sure what an enhanced experience could be that you've just described there at one of these conferences, but it's slightly worrying, isn't it? Apparently, one of the things you get is a guaranteed seat at the Chancellor's speech. Well, we can show you a speech that she made in January. We normally play gaffes on a Friday. This is probably one of them. Have a look.
Low growth is not our destiny. But growth will not come without a fight. Without a government willing to take the right decisions now to change our country's future for the better. That's what our plan for change is all about. That is what drives me as Chancellor.
I expect her to pull a sort of lightsaber out and go, this is not your destiny. I mean, what's she talking about? Well, there's been nothing but low growth, 0.1% down in January. I think it was 0.1% up in December, wasn't it? Which was thought to be not very good, because that also would have included people's Christmas shopping.
I mean, I think that, that bizarre delivery as well. I mean, it's weird when you managed to make Keir Starmer look like a sort of lucid modern statesman yesterday. But what can I say? I mean, Rachel Reeves, I think that often, as you say, talking the talk is not the same thing as doing it. And businesses will turn around and say, hang on a sec, talk about growth and how important businesses are, but do you appreciate what we do for the economy? And I think that, as I say, 38 billion in the first budget in taxes, all the different changes and the employment rights bill. And I think it's no surprise that businesses, the engines of growth, are responding not in the way the Chancellor wants with her talk of growth.
No, exactly right. And finally, Ed Miliband, maybe it should be Miliband, that's what he should be. He's off to China. I got this from Ray in Liverpool. Morning, Mike. Says, is Mad Miliband flying to China, and will he be using Hoyle's air miles to upgrade to business class? Lindsay Hoyle still smarting, I'm sure, from all that sort of criticism by the Daily Mail. But what else is he doing? It's his third cabinet minister, I think, since they got in July, who's gone to China. David Lammy's been, Rachel Reeves has been, now Miliband's there. They obviously seem to think that China is worth cozying up to.
I mean, I can see their argument in the sense of, oh, this is one of the world's two great superpowers. They have such a sort of impact on climate emissions, and they're important in trade. I'm just deeply sceptical they're going to get anywhere. And I think there's two reasons for that. One of which is that the sums that the Chinese are talking about, when Rachel Reeves, for instance, went there to get trade, she got less than 100 million.
Yeah.
You know, a few years ago, Theresa May got more than 1.1 billion.
Yeah.
So I think that the money, sums involved, are not worth, frankly, the debasement, given the amounts of, sort of human rights atrocities that have gone on in China, Xinjiang and Hong Kong. And the second point I'd say as well is that China has shown itself an unreliable partner when it comes to similar agreements in different sectors. So I'm very sceptical about this, and I suspect it's more about Ed Miliband sort of doing something and being seen.
Well, because also he's seeking to sort of look for more and new partnerships in renewable energy and all of that. While meanwhile, he's being warned by MI6 and various other organisations that know about these things that we shouldn't get too cosy with China when it comes to manufacturing wind farms and all the rest of it, because there's clearly a risk of them being able to control it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, obviously, the solar panels that are being made, I think he's been a little bit glib in some of his responses in Parliament about whether solar farms are being made in Xinjiang and the likely involvement of human slave labour in that. So I do think there's legitimate questions to ask from a national security perspective.
Yeah, absolutely right. Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed, James Hill, Deputy Political at The Spectator there. Morning, Mike, says Zoe in Lancashire. It's all right Starmer saying all this about sacking everyone in NHS England, but how many times have we heard him say he's going to do things and further down the line nothing happens? Very true. And M in Bath says this: Starmer is allowed to be right-wing because the mainstream media are enabling him to be. If the Tories had attempted to do anything to the NHS, they would have been accused of trying to privatise it, not excusing the Tories as they failed, but I do feel that the media in this country wholeheartedly seems to be behind Labour in a way that they never were with the Tory government. I think that's right. I said this to Charlie Rowley, that they're all congratulating Keir Starmer a week or so ago for his amazing, dexterity and diplomacy while dealing with Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky and all the European leaders. But it's all come to nothing. And it's all gone away again now. So whatever, credits he thought he built up with the British people, which I frankly don't think he did, but the media did say that they thought he did, that's all gone. It's all evaporated before his very eyes. And so now he's back to rolling up his sleeves and talking about the NHS and saying that he's now going to do something that even the Tories, if they tried to do, would have been probably stopped from doing. Let's get a voice note from Paul on the state of Britain.
Hey, Mike. Paul here from Penarth. It's gone that bad with the rubbish. Oh, it's terrible. Even the rats got overalls on.
The rats have got overalls on. We're going to speak to John Reid, the founder of Clean Up Britain, after the next break. But before that, we should have another gaffe. Here's Julia.
There are all men involved in this. It's a lot of male ego. A lot of, frankly, I think this is a technical term, Ofcom, hello. A lot of slapping willies on tables, I think, that's going on at the moment. That's what as a woman, I'm just saying there's just a lot of slapping appendages on tables.
Really didn't need that image, but...
Well, you're the one who gave us another image earlier. There we are.
So on the one hand, you think, how could he have changed his mind that quickly? I think there should be a heavy dose of scepticism with anything Keir Starmer does, because he's taken more positions in the Kama Sutra on every single issue that he's ever talked about.
Don't give me images like that. Oh, good God, for the love of God. People might be having their 11s, they're eating now.
At the same time, isn't it amusing that if you look at what's happened over the past couple of weeks...
That is worrying, isn't it? References that you certainly don't need at that time of the morning. Yeah, we would never do anything like that, but very good. Julie back, of course, on Monday. Columns in The Sun today as well, if you want to check that out. Absolutely right. Mike says, Tony, the UK economy has shrank by 0.1%. He just goes, LOL. Yeah, well done, Rach. Another brilliant move. Rachel from Complaints, please. Hello? No, she's off today. She's working from home. Let's talk.
I'm just very not surprised at all. Both sides need a rest. Both sides are suffering in different ways. Yet at the same time, Putin very much feels on top of the world at the moment. I think that's what's very indicative of that is the fact that he went to the front line for the first time either ever or for a very long time. Philip may be able to correct me on that one. But either way, he's very rarely seen on the front, particularly in Kursk, which has always been a thorn in his side and a huge embarrassment to him.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:24. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. We've got 5 glorious days and 4 glorious hours every single day, Monday to Friday, and we can bring you all the news that you need, some opinions that you won't hear anywhere else, and everything that happens around it. And lots of your messages as well, which are brilliant. Chris has sent us a picture of his breakfast. He says, great show. I've been up since 6 a.m. creating this whilst watching Ole, inspired by Meghan. And of course, looks like a little bit of fruit, a couple of pancakes maybe. I think we've got it if we can show it. This is the kind of thing that people are inspired to do. Oh, no, it's a couple of pieces of toast, sorry. I was looking at a much smaller version of it. Very well done. It's great to be, what does she call herself? A present parent? Great to be a present parent. There we are. Yeah, marvellous. It's a thing of great beauty. And Stuart says this, Mike, regarding the depressed Ghanaian, as he's become known, a better solution surely would be to move his family to be with him in Ghana. Well, you would think so. You know, I don't even know why they're still here. Absolutely ridiculous. By the way, Chris, have you been up since 6 a.m. making that creation for your breakfast? That's an hour and a half you've taken to do that. So if you had 4 kids, that would be what, about 6 hours? So you'd be up, you have to get up at 2 in the morning to get them up for 8 and give them some nice fruit. Absolutely right. What's the betting, says Sean in Burlington, that every one of the 9,500 people who work for NHS England will be moved to similarly pointless administration jobs elsewhere in the useless NHS? Well, I think there's a pretty good chance that that's exactly what's going to happen. But let's talk now to John Reid, founder of Clean Up Britain, because yesterday we sort of inadvertently, not like Jonathan Reynolds, actually properly inadvertently fell upon a bit of a story about how terribly bad the rubbish problem is in this country. We had dozens and dozens of you sending in pictures from where you live, fly tipping all over the place, you know, bins that weren't properly emptied and were filled to overflowing, black plastic bin bags broken up, garbage spilling out onto the streets. You know, we've got a situation in Birmingham now where there's so many rats that the bin men have gone on strike. And so John Reid is here, founder of Clean Up Britain. John, very good morning to you.
Morning.
What's gone wrong, do you think, with this country? Because, you know, I've been saying we should be proud of where we live. We should be proud of our country. When people visit it, they should see the great things about it, not just all the rubbish.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely true, Mike. It's really, really sad. We seem to have lost all sense of pride and respect, or many of us do in this country. Over 20 million people in Britain admit to dropping litter. And that's one of the reasons why, unfortunately, the country is the most littered country in the Western world. And if you drive around Britain, as I certainly do, you just see it absolutely everywhere. Right. This is why myself and one or two others started Clean Up Britain a few years ago as a voluntary campaign to try and get something done, because it really, really is sad that we have so many people who seem to be intent on environmentally desecrating the place where they live. It's lunacy.
It really is. And I mean, obviously I spend most of my time in London, and I see quite a few street cleaners, and, you know, you see there's sometimes the little vans with the brushes, you sometimes see individual operatives, if that's the right word for them, with their little bin that moves along on wheels, and they're picking up litter and stuff like that. But by and large, the streets of this country, there's litter blowing down them all, isn't there?
There is. There absolutely is. And the worst thing as well, and I'm sure your viewers will notice this, they go out today, just ask them to have a look round, because there is litter literally everywhere on every road in this country. If you were to put a pin in a map somewhere, and we'd go there together, I'd guarantee and put my life on it, there would be litter.
Yeah.
I drove a couple of days ago from Felixstowe to Rugby on the A14. It's about 170 miles.
Right.
There was no more than 10 metres of road that wasn't littered. It's appalling. It's embarrassing. It's shameful.
I mean, we had a lot of messages yesterday from all sorts of people. We had one in particular that stood out from a guy that lives on a canal boat, and he had taken his canal through Birmingham, you know, that lovely part of the canal where you can go through and there's some nice pubs and restaurants and stuff like that. And he said the litter in the canal was actually snagging up the engine.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was so much of it.
Yeah, it's absolutely everywhere, and it's quite a complex problem. But actually, unfortunately, a lot of people are just treating this country as a giant dustbin. But on top of that, there are particular issues. You've alluded to Birmingham. Obviously, Birmingham City Council have gone bust, and that city literally, if you go to parts of Birmingham, it looks like downtown Bangladesh.
Yeah.
It really does. And we should be ashamed about the way this country's become. And it's great to see that so many of viewers have taken the time to send videos.
And is it, you know, and this is a question that people don't like to ask, but I'm going to ask it. Is it because we've imported some of this from places where it is really, really horrible, like whatever downtown Bangladesh looks like, Dhaka, or, you know, some part of the third world?
Look, I'm not going to say yes to that. And the reason is because it's letting too many, what I'm going to describe as indigenous Brits, off the hook.
Yeah.
There are many people in this country who just seem to have no respect for this country now in terms of pride and looking after their local communities, and they treat it like a dustbin.
Yeah.
I know it sounds old-fashioned, but I'm afraid it's true. And you know, let's be clear about this. There are a lot of people who just are intent on. They just don't care. They do seem to have lost all pride and respect in the country.
Yeah.
And
is there a cure? Can we fix it?
Yeah, we can. There are a number of things we can do, and we can fix it. I mean, really, the only solution, is behavioural change. We've got to get people's attitudes and behaviour changing, and part of that actually is that, if you remember, back about 50 years ago, there were things like government information campaigns. Of course, the government's bankrupt now, as we all know, so there isn't a chance of being able to do that. But that's one of the things we need to do. Also, we think at Clean Up Britain that there needs to be serious penalties, and then fines need to be £1,000 for people who drop litter, and a lot more for people who fly tip. Because we saw recently there are now a record number of fly tips last year in the UK, 1.14 million. And that is costing every single one of your listeners and viewers a huge amount of money, because, of course, at the end of the day, it's councils who have to clean those up, and that costs a fortune that could be spent on more productive social services, shall we put it like that.
I mean, some people say to me as well that the difficulty with some sort of rubbish tips and places like, you know, town dumps and things like that, who have started making appointments necessary before you can go and drop stuff off, or started charging people, even if they're not commercial, you know, builders, to actually use the tip and that kind of thing. Is that an issue?
Yeah, it is an issue in some areas, actually. Yeah, these tips are inaccessible for some people. They're, as a relic of sort of COVID, some of them still have these booking rules where you have to go online and book a slot. To some extent, they're limited as to what you can take. But what we've got to understand is that waste costs a hell of a lot of money to dispose of, and somebody's got to pay for it. And at the end of the day, you know, it was always us as individuals and your viewers who are paying for it one way or another. But even if that's the case, there is no excuse whatsoever for somebody driving into our beautiful countryside and dumping sofas and fridges and goodness knows what in the middle of the countryside. And that happens on a regular basis in every single county of England and Wales.
I mean, in my street, for example, about a week ago, there was a family who obviously were moving out, right? And they took I watched them, and they put some stuff in a van, some stuff in a car, but they've left outside, and it's still there a week later, an entire bed, the frame, the side tables, the mattress, it's just sitting there on the street. And I'm going, well, what happens to that? I mean, does somebody come and take it away? You know, they're not there anymore, so what happens to that?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, really, they should have run the council in advance and arranged for them to come and take it away. But, of course, that takes time and effort and money, and they would have been liable to paying the council for money for doing that. So, yeah, it's irresponsible behaviour, isn't it? It's selfish.
It's really horrible. Really, I mean, you look at it, you know, and I don't like looking at it. Every time I go past, I'm thinking, and yesterday, of course, it was raining, so now it's wet, soaked through, and you're kind of thinking, well, how long is this going to sit here for?
Yeah, and actually, that's a very good question. If we come back and have this conversation in a couple of months, I bet there's a good chance it'll still be sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, I might set fires. No, of course, I'm not allowed to do that, am I? But, you know, it is ridiculous. And, I mean, I'm sure people will tell me that that's happening in their street up and down the country.
And yeah, they will tell you that, and it is happening, unfortunately. That is symptomatic of the problem that we have. But it's only one element of the problem. I mean, that's essentially low-level fly tipping, people chucking sofas out on the road where they live. But also, it's just, you go to parks, you go down country lanes, roads, they're covered in litter.
Yeah.
You know, it's just made our country look a really run-down, filthy dump. Let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I'm sick of it, frankly. I just don't like it. I mean, we've always been bad at litter. You know, every other country in the world I ever go to has never been as bad as what I see in my own country, which is really depressing. But listen, great to talk to you, John. We'll keep in touch because we've sort of inadvertently fallen upon this as a bit of a campaign. So we're going to see what we can do to highlight it to people and get it fixed. John Reid, founder of Clean Up Britain. Thanks very much indeed. You won't believe this, right? But we broke the news a little bit earlier in the last hour that the UK economy contracted by 0.1% in January, according to the Office for National Statistics. Well, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has come out and said this: the world has changed, and across the globe we are feeling the consequences. That's why we're going further and faster to protect our country, reform our public services, and kickstart economic growth to deliver on our plan for change. Well, I'm looking forward to that. When's the kickstart of the economic growth going to happen then? Because it hasn't happened yet. In fact, if anything, it's slumped. You can see from the economy contracting by 0.1%. The world has changed, and across the globe we are feeling the consequences. That sounds like a bit of an excuse to me. You know, what are they going to do now? Blame the Ukraine? What are they going to do when they manage to get peace in Ukraine? They won't be able to blame that anymore. And will they bring the prices down? This is a question I've got for them. You know, the prices all went up because of the Ukraine war. That means if it stops, they all come down again? Probably not. One from Carol. Morning, Mike. Caroline Leavitt is brilliant. She's exactly what we need here in the UK. Her phrase, "he was given the privilege of studying in the USA," shows just how proud and patriotic Americans are of their country. We have lost that feeling and identity, mainly because it's being erased on a daily basis. Carol's in Shoreham by Sea. Keep up your great work, she says. Yes, thank you very much indeed. One from Paul. He says, ha, Ed Miliband. Why is he going to China? Who opened one coal-fired power station every single week? Bonkers Britain. I think Ed Miliband is a new name for him. It's better than Millipede, isn't it? Miliband. We'd love that. Carl, Mike, thing that gets me with these politicians is them saying about changing things now for a better future, but these guys won't again. No matter what they do, they are done. Philip says, Mike, why is no one talking about water bills going through the roof? Just got my new bill for the next year, £534.41 to £831.60, thanks to Southern Water. I'm so angry right now. Well, listen, you're right to be angry. We actually spoke about this last week, I think, the incredible increase in the amount of water bills that people are now being asked to pay. Similar for electric bills, similar for gas bills. Energy bills, of course, highest in Europe, and I think in the Western world we've got the highest electricity bills. I've got a piece actually going into the Telegraph today, which is all about smart meters and how there's a real move to make everybody get a smart meter by stealth, even if you don't want one. Because a lot of the top 6 companies are being investigated now by Ofgem because they're not doing it as they should be doing it, and they're being, shall we say, economical with the truth. I'll bring you more on that. Let's get a voice note from Matt.
Morning, Mike. It's Matt from Doncaster. Another week, another madness. So they're going to relax the law on hybrid cars. Another U-turn. Beep, beep, beep. You know what? Back when horse and cart was a thing, they didn't make it illegal to own a horse and cart, or they didn't ban the sales of a horse and cart. The combustion engine car, just become a natural progression. But no, this world's gone absolutely balmy. How can you take away something without giving a viable option? Have a great weekend, mate. Congratulations to your son on passing his test.
Matt, thank you very much indeed. Apparently he's got a flat tyre. He's expecting me to fix it this weekend. I think he's got another think coming. 7:37.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 7:39. We're here, of course, until 10 o'clock. Got this from Jay, who says the council has special lorries that travel round Leeds picking up the fly-tip furniture. The small green, which my flat overlooks, is like a magical mystery as to what I will wake up to dumped there. Rocking horses, beds, old speakers, you name it, it gets dumped there. I mean, it's unbelievable, this, isn't it? Jules says this, Mike, the rise in fly tipping is due to the charges and restrictions on entering our local dump. Yet another service that the taxpayer can no longer use. Corrupt councils spending money on migrant benefits. There is no excuse for fly tipping, but there is a cause. I think that's right. One from Rob, who says, if Starmer removes 9,000 jobs, those 9,000 will have to find 9,000 jobs, and that's 9,000 less jobs for those currently unemployed. All he will do is move 9,000 from one quango and public service department to another. Is this not obvious? Well, I think you might well be right. Let's talk to Martin Gower, former NHS Trust Chair, because, of course, he knows a thing or two about running a health organisation. Let's see what he makes of this plan. Martin, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to
thanks for having me on.
No, good to see you. There's a sort of mixed reaction, isn't there, to this abolition of NHS England? Some people are quite surprised that he's done something quite so dramatic, but others are saying to me, well, you're not really going to get rid of 9,500 people. How can you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole lot about this that you've got to have doubt about.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing obviously is the involvement of unions in anything to do with the NHS.
Yeah.
I mean, if they are going to get rid of that sort of number of people, the compensation they're going to have to pay in terms of redundancy payments will be massive.
Yeah.
Some of these people have served for a very long time. I was around in the NHS as a chairman when NHS England was formed. It was actually called the NHS Commissioning Board. It wasn't, they gave it the name of NHS England. They called themselves that. It wasn't actually set up as that. Actually, the same people who we've been working with nationally and regionally were the same people who became into NHS England. And what I suspect is going to happen is that the same people will move back into the Department of Health and Social Care.
Right. So what do they all do, these people? I mean, 9,500 people is a lot of people that you can just, at a stroke, say you're going to get rid of, because presumably they don't do anything.
Well, they do things, but they're not necessarily core to actually improving patient care or improving public confidence in the NHS. There's a whole lot of things that are nice to do, but are really not necessary.
Right.
And are not particularly helpful either to the NHS trusts who have to deal with all this stuff that they bring in.
Right.
I'm not against abolishing NHS England. In fact, I've called for it quite a few times. But I would say that the alternative seems to me to be almost a political power grab.
Right.
We want to bring this in-house into the Department of Health and Social Care, and I'd love to know what they're doing about social care, because they're not doing much about it.
No, exactly. Well, I was asking the question this morning as well, Martin. If you are, say, the chair of an NHS trust, which you used to be, and you're waking up this morning thinking, how is this going to change my world? How is it going to change his world or her world?
Well, I suppose there's two things. There's hope and expectation. I mean, hope would be that it would change it quite a lot and make life easier and enable you to get on with the job of looking after your patients.
Yeah, but how, though?
Well, because one of the things they do is endlessly ask for information. We merged my trust with another trust, an absolutely clear, positive, sensible decision. It wasn't rocket science. And we were working on the same patch, and work was being duplicated. We took them over, we reduced staff numbers as well. But actually, it took us 2 years of banter with NHS England, continuously. Oh, can you give us figures on that? Can we have a meeting about this? And it could have been done in 6 months.
Yeah.
So there's my confidence in NHS England is not that high. And I actually think it's a good thing in one way to get rid of them. But your question is a good one. What are they all doing? That question, I think, is all around the public services.
Yeah.
What are they all doing? They're a lot of them. A lot of these people will be working from home.
Yeah.
NHS England. A lot of them. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but it will be quite a significant percentage.
Probably about 9,000.
Working from home?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we had a call from somebody in Leeds who says the Department for Work and Pensions building where NHS England is housed is locally known as the Kremlin, and there's never anybody in it.
No. I don't think you'd have a problem getting a parking space.
No, exactly.
I just think there's a few things here. It's just the same people they'll move into the DHSC. And I'm not sure I trust what's going on. I'm not sure I believe all the dynamics of what are supposed to be doing and the number of jobs that are going. And I'm not sure it's been thought through. It sounds a bit of a soundbite to me.
Well, I mean, that's this government all over, isn't it? I mean, everything they say isn't quite what it seems. Everything they promise hasn't yet been delivered. Everything they say they're delivering, they're not. I mean, look at this. We got a growth down actually in January to 0.1%. The economy's contracted. In February, this is what Rachel Reeves said, getting more money in people's pockets is my #1 mission. That's why we're going further and faster to deliver economic growth. Except they're not. It doesn't mean anything. It's a meaningless soundbite.
Well, we have pretend economists and pretend solicitors who are kind of running things. And I just don't have the level of confidence, frankly, Mike, that this particular issue with the NHS is actually A, going to be achieved at all, or B, is going to make any difference, or C, is actually going to make it worse.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is bringing greater political control over healthcare. Nobody else does this. Nobody else in other countries around Europe, for example, are actually having the healthcare system run by the government. They really, really don't.
And if it's going to be run by the government, that is the worst idea anybody's had.
Absolutely. I mean, the more that's the bit that would scare me.
Right.
And I think it's not really going to work at all.
But this again takes me back because somebody's asked the question this morning as well that if the Tories were trying to do this, right, you can imagine the howls of derision that would be coming from the Labour benches, right? The fact that Labour are doing it, it's kind of they get a pass because the media doesn't have a go at them because they don't think they're going to sell it off. But we've had 14 years of being told by everyone that wanted to criticise the Tory government it's their fault the NHS is not working, right? It now turns out that the government isn't running the NHS, it's the NHS that's running it, which is what I've been saying all along. And it's the NHS that's not working, not the people in government who are not making it work.
Yeah, I mean, the government kind of half work it. And the concept that Andrew Lansley had, which was to have it as an arm's length body, so healthcare will be kind of a bit divorced from the politicky end of government. For example, I mean, you don't want the NHS to be used as some social structure to whitewash, encourage, we spend much more money on people of need and people, I just think some of those social views were possibly helped. What we have to accept, Mike, is the NHS isn't all bad everywhere. And it really isn't. There are places where where local groups get together, including social care, and put together a pretty good system that works well for the public and the patients. But the trouble is that particularly in the bigger cities, and particularly, I hate to say it, where you have a large increasing population, many of whom don't speak English and all that sort of stuff, I think that causes a really big challenge in the city. I'm extraordinarily lucky living in rural South Warwickshire. We have a pretty good health system here. I can't really criticise it. Well, I can criticise it, but not by that much. But there's a lot of people around the country who have a really poor system. And by the way, if the idea of bringing this more into the political arena is to follow what is done in Wales and Scotland, then thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't think so. Martin, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Former NHS Trust Chair there saying he's not entirely convinced by this plan of Keir Starmer's. Well, knock me over with the feather is what I would say. Lisa says, morning, Mike. Two-tier was in my husband's office yesterday and he said he has the worst haircut they've ever seen, described as being cut with a knife and fork. Fixing the foundations of my haircut. Good morning, Mike, says Debs in Sheffield. I was on the NHS waiting list for 2 years. They rang me last week with an appointment and surprise, surprise, they sent a letter this week saying due to unforeseen circumstances they had to cancel it. Not a mention of another appointment. Also, our streets are disgusting. Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day who said that they got an appointment for some procedure or other in the NHS for something like July the 10th, right? But then they got a letter saying, due to unforeseen circumstances, we're cancelling it. Well, how can you have unforeseen circumstances, 3 months or 4 months away? Surely you can fix the unforeseen circumstances that you didn't foresee because you've got the time to fix them. It's absolute rubbish. It's a complete racket. Lewis says this, my Latvian partner is proud of the cleanliness of her country and finds this country disgusting. Well, I'm not surprised. Coming up, we're going to talk to Ian Aitchison, former prison governor and author of Screwed, Britain's Prison Crisis, because, of course, judges are now being asked to stop sending criminals to prisons because there's no room. Brilliant. I thought they moved a load of people out, thereby making the streets more dangerous so that they could make more room. What's going on? There's the talk.
I think it's a great ambition. It's something I would obviously have promoted forever and for many years. But I mean, the biggest quango in the world is the NHS and NHS England. So I'm very pleased actually he's taking this step. And you know, perversely, sometimes big changes to the NHS, because it's become such a big politicised beast. It's been treated as a political football. That it can only be Labour that can actually address some of these problems perversely. And you know, I'll give them credit where credit is due.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 7:53. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. The sun is up. Very weird weather yesterday, by the way. We had hail, we had frozen rain, we had snow in some places, and there was snow in Cheltenham earlier this week at the racing. And of course, then we had bright sunshine. Suddenly the streets were soaking wet, then they were shining with sun. It's a very, very weird time. It's sort of April showersy, but it's not April. Let's get a voice note from Sarah.
Morning, Mike. First time messenger. I just wanted to phone in to say I walk my dogs in the cemetery every morning, and last summer I picked up sacks and sacks of dog poo that was just dropped I dragged mattresses to the bin. Picked up all the cans, cleaned everywhere, and then the council took the bin away.
Ridiculous. And that's in a cemetery. People dumping stuff in a cemetery. I mean, who does that? Something very weird going on in this country. Let's talk to Ian Aitchison, former prison governor, expert on the prison system. He's the author of a book called Screwed, Britain's Prison Crisis and How to Escape It. The prison system, a bit like the littering problem in this country, Ian, seems to be getting worse by the day. We've seen already under Labour the release of criminals in order to make room for some more criminals. We're now worried that judges won't send criminals to prison because there's no room for them.
Well, good morning, Mike.
Morning.
Yeah, I was listening to the previous speaker, and I just thought, in relation to the NHS and all the problems with His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, it's a case of hold my beer. There was a report out yesterday, I'm sure you've seen it, from the Public Accounts Committee, and it frames, a car crash oncoming in three different directions in terms of prison space. That is broken promises, reactive mismanagement, and basically a lack of solid planning, and that's painting a very clear picture about of why we're going to go to bust in terms of prison space by 2026.
Yeah,
this is a catastrophe that was made in government but executed in Whitehall. I mean, the report talks about the government's 2021 pledge to create 20,000 new prison places by the mid-2020s. And it says it's completely unrealistic. I mean, that's polite language.
Right.
In this country, you can't even build a hen house without a public inquiry, let alone a prison. And the assumptions that were made is that all of these places could be created and the planning would only take a matter of weeks. As of today, we've only 6,500 of those places delivered.
Right.
The rest delayed onto 2031. The costs are going through the roof. And that failure to plan properly, the incompetence, combined with those rising prisoner numbers, up nearly 100 a week, means that we're going to hit bust by 2026, despite all the emergency releases, where in fact the risk wasn't eliminated by people being released from prison. It was simply displaced from the cells to the streets, with a probation service that is, I'm afraid, simply unable to cope as it is, let alone with the extra business that it's getting. And meanwhile, back in the cells, you've got, a system at breaking point with overcrowding, driving up violence and self-harm. Assaults on staff are up about 20% last year alone. So even if you could make these spaces available, I'm not clear who's going to actually staff them.
Right. That's the problem. There's been a staffing crisis in prisons for as long as I can remember, really, going all the way back to sort of the Blair government, it seems to me. And for a party of government who say that they're going to, sort of get rid of all the red tape around planning, and they're going to stop NIMBYism, and they're going to stop all manner of things in order to build more houses, why can't they do that for prisons?
Well, it's a really good question. I think prisons, and I've said this for years, should be part of our critical national infrastructure.
Yeah.
And it's very unpopular having a massive prison built next door to you, so there's always going to be objections. We do have plenty of space. We could repurpose some of the older prisons that we closed stupidly back in the early noughties in terms of the austerity project. We could repurpose some of them if they haven't been sold off to be hotels or whatever. But, the Ministry of Justice is permanently stuck in firefighting mode.
Yeah.
It's relying on stopgaps like the early emergency release of prisoners, or cramming 2 people into cells meant for 1. A quarter of all prisoners are doubled up.
Yeah.
These are band-aid solutions. Like they don't just cost taxpayers more. The expansion price for these 20,000 extra places has ballooned. Now it's ballooned by, I think, 4.2 billion. So it's 80% over budget. But they also, they undermine rehabilitation. So, overcrowding shuts everything down, blocks access to education, rehabilitation programs, and it makes reoffending more likely, and therefore it puts the public at risk. And these people go out of prison worse than when they come in. Up to 20% of people going into some prisons acquire a drug habit while they're in the prison. Yeah. So that's not doing anything to reduce reoffending. But there doesn't seem to be any plan B.
No, that's the problem, isn't it?
These hopes and dreams that the prison service have and the Ministry of Justice have, I don't think meet the reality test. the upcoming sentencing review is prayed for to cut demand. But I mean, that's a gamble. It's due in spring. Its impact is uncertain. The interim report was quite unpopular with some of the ideas that it had.
Yeah.
So we've got projections, and they're showing a shortfall of, I think, 5,500 spaces by 2027.
Yeah.
And the plans for the remaining places are the report says they're riddled with risk and uncertainty, like those planning permission delays that you talked about.
Exactly.
So
we've got to run, Ian. Sorry, we're running right out of time. We're just about to hit the news. So the problem here is going to be, where are the prison spaces going to come from? We'll be back after this.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 8. I am Mike Graham, of course, with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Alex Phillips will be in then. We've got Plank of the Week coming up later on tonight. There's plenty of people nominated this week, and there's an awful lot of plankery going on. Coming up in this hour, some more news for you, in case you didn't know this already. It turns out Border Force, and particularly the Border Force staff who man the patrol boats which intercept migrants in the Channel, are going to go on strike. It says here, in a move that could disrupt operations to tackle the crossings. Well, surely, actually, they'll be better, actually, if they go on strike, because what these guys do is they go and get the people off the little boats, put them onto their boats and bring them into Dover. So if they're not doing it, perhaps the people who come on the small boats won't come. You never know. If they hear there's a strike, they might go, oh, blimey, we're not going to get rescued. So we might as well stay where we are. 0344 499 1000 is the number. John Rentoul coming up very shortly. We'll be telling him about the great news about the economy. It's contracted by 0.1% in January. Rachel Reeves keeps banging on about her plan for change, but the plan for change isn't going very well because nothing's really changing. The economy's flatlining. She's blaming the downturn in manufacturing. She's blaming the world changing. She's blaming everything but her own budget, which of course is largely to blame because most people are not investing in the country's economy because they haven't got any money. Because they haven't got the wherewithal to hire anyone, because they're getting taxed more, because coming up in April, there's going to be a massive hike in national insurance for so many firms in this country who are already struggling. 0344 499 1000. We'll also talk about the NHS. Keir Starmer's decided to abolish NHS England. I got quite excited yesterday. I thought he's going to abolish the NHS. That's what he should really do. But he hasn't. He says he's found 9,500 people who don't do anything. He's going to get rid of them all. If you believe that, I've got some swampland in Florida to sell you. It's 4 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Gregg. Now, you know we like to show you some stories and interesting tidbits from around the world, and we've got some here to show you. This is a plane that crash-landed in Denver Airport, and it sort of burst into flames. It's an American Airlines flight. There have been a lot of problems with planes, but a very bizarre thing happened. All the people were asked to stand on the wing. Now, I don't know about you, but as far as I remember, in my sort of, airline class 101, that's where they put all the fuel, isn't it? So they're standing on a wing, the plane's on fire, and the jet fuel is literally under their feet. I'm not sure why they'd be standing on that wing. Maybe somebody could explain. We often have pilots listening to this show, so maybe you could tell us what on earth they're doing. Normally you stand on a wing if the plane's in the water, but they seem to be just standing on a wing. I don't know why you'd evacuate and do that when you've got literally ground to walk on. It doesn't really make any sense to me. Anyway, I don't know if John Rental could answer this question. John, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
It's a strange thing to do, though, isn't it?
That does seem strange, but no, I'm afraid I've got no expertise in the aviation industry to share with you there.
Definitely not a story. Listen, the economy's contracted, I'm afraid. Bad news for Rachel Reeves, 0.1%. She's saying that it's all down to the fact that manufacturing's slowed down a bit and the world is changing, apparently. And across the globe, we are feeling the consequences. That's her statement. But it's not great news for her, is it?
It's not. I mean, it's only 1 month's figures, so we shouldn't get too...
Well, yeah, but some people said when she went up by 0.1%, oh, great news for Rachel Reeves. So I think we have to go the other way and be even-handed, at least.
Well, I'm completely even-handed.
I know you are.
It's always only 1 month's figures, and you've got to look at the broader picture.
Well, the broader picture is pretty much
completely flat,
as you
say.
Yeah.
So no great shakes there. I mean, one thing that I have noticed is recently there's been a lot of stories about increasing activity in the housing market. There's been a lot of people buying and selling.
Yeah, but isn't that a lot of people trying to get their deal done before the change in capital gains tax?
Well, it could be, but I mean, it's quite interesting that there's...
And stamp duty as well.
Well, that's all going to change in next month, is it?
Yes, I believe so.
Well, yes, but whatever the reasons, I think it's quite interesting. It suggests there may be something moving in the economy.
Well, I think there's people exchanging all sorts of things because of the change in the tax regimen. You know, so some people are leaving the country, some people are selling houses, some people are buying houses, putting money that they've got somewhere else into property. Maybe, I mean, there's any number of reasons, but I think April is a deadline that everyone's looking at to go. We better do this before April.
Yeah, no, maybe that's right. But I mean, I think. As usual, you're suggesting that this is all it's all Rachel Reeves' fault that there's no growth.
Well, it is. She's the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
But Mike, hang on, wait a minute. You haven't set out your alternative. Where else are you going to get the money from, or where are you going to get the savings from? Especially now
what money do you want?
Well, I mean, normally when I say what public spending would you cut, you go foreign aid, but they've cut that. So what next?
I've never actually said that. I don't think I've ever said that. Well, I wouldn't be giving minimum 18 billion pounds to the Chagos Islands.
Oh, come on, Mike. That's 90 million a year. It's pocket money.
Well, it's not pocket money because amortised over the years, it's going to be 52 billion.
So well, obviously, if anything, if you add up any annual payment over 100 years, it comes to quite a lot. But it's not a significant amount of money in the present day.
Well, you've asked me what I would cut. I would cut that. What's wrong with that?
Well, because that gives you 90 million a year. So what else are you going to cut?
No, it gives you 18 billion straight off.
No, it doesn't. It gives you 18 billion over 100 years. Okay. That's no good. That's no good to anybody in the present. I would cut all the net zero nonsense out. You know, they're spending billions and billions. That doesn't give you a huge amount of money either.
They're spending billions on net zero. What are you talking about?
Well, you say billions. How many billions? It's not that
about
many.
19. It's about 19 billion they're spending on subsidies to their various green companies to set up wind farms, to set up solar panel farms, to to ensure that people are being given. And I said this to you, I think the last time we spoke. Heat pumps in their homes, which the taxpayers are paying for in social housing and in housing associations and all that sort of thing. The people aren't even asking for it, but they're doing it, and they're spending an awful lot of money.
Heat pump doesn't even improve his house's EPC rating. So
yeah, exactly. And Ed Miliband's going off to China. I'd stop that for a start. I wouldn't spend any money on sending any more people around the world on useless missions.
No ministers on foreign trips.
No ministers on foreign trips. No.
Well, that's going to save you tuppence halfpenny a week as well.
But it's also going to send a message that they can't be profligate with our money while they're telling us that we must wait for the growth because we haven't got enough money. This is not serious politics, Mike. Well, of course it's serious politics.
The increase in employers' national insurance raises a vast sum of money.
It doesn't, though, because everything else...
Unless you can say where you would get that money from.
No, it doesn't. Listen, I've said to you before, it's not my job to come up with reasons and places to save the money from. The point is that they've got a ridiculous aim of doing things, and most of the money that they seek to raise is not being raised. For example, the VAT backlash from private schools. We're now learning that more and more local councils are having to pay for kids to go into taxis to be delivered to a state school a long way from where they live because there aren't any places where they live. So they're not collecting.
That's a different issue,
no,
Mike.
it's not a different issue.
That's special educational needs.
No, everything is connected, John. So the point is that my point is that they're not collecting the money they said they would collect on the VAT because they're having to pay out at the other end. Similarly, the national insurance hike will not give them the kind of money they expect. I spoke to a guy who works for a taxi company that brings me into work every day, and next week that particular company, which employs 5,000 drivers, is putting them all on 0 hours contracts. So they're not going to pay. Not only are they not going to pay the national insurance hike, they're not going to pay the national insurance they pay now.
Well, we'll see.
That's a fact. I'm sorry if it doesn't agree with your rhetoric, but that's a fact. Other companies will do that.
Well, yeah, but it will still raise a huge amount of money because most people are not sort of movable in that way. I'm making a very simple point, which is that unless people could say where they would get the money from, then just criticising Rachel Reeves for suppressing growth by raising taxes doesn't actually get you.
Well, she hasn't. But what she hasn't done is create the atmosphere for growth, and what she's done is actually create an atmosphere for static activity. Because in the end, a lot of companies are not hiring people because they don't want to pay the extra national insurance. They're not investing more in their product because they don't know what the future is going to hold. There's a lot of uncertainty in hospitality, for example, in all of those businesses, and so people that I speak to in business are very sort of, I would say, fearful about what the future is going to be like, and they think that the economy is actually going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, possibly, but none of that is to do with Rachel Reeves' tax increase.
Well, it is, because what she's done on top of all of that, what you might call, insecurity, is that she's putting more pressure on businesses, which is where the growth comes from. Unfortunately, the Labour government thinks that growth comes from Labour giving free money to people. It doesn't.
I don't think anybody thinks that.
No, they do. They think that they think that the government can stimulate growth by starting up companies like GB Energy, which is a complete waste of time.
I completely agree. But I was disappointed that you didn't start your show by congratulating Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting on tackling unnecessary bureaucracy.
Well, because I don't know whether they will. Because everyone that I speak to, and I have spoken to since the announcement, doesn't really believe it. Because there's 9,500 people. If there's 9,500 people doing nothing, working for the NHS, that tells you all you need to know, doesn't it? So are they really going to get rid of them, or are they just going to move them somewhere?
Well, I think closing down NHS England is a good idea. Almost everybody, apart from you, seems to think so.
If it's closed down and you fire 9,500 people, what do you think that's going to do for the economy? Where are they going to get jobs?
Now you're against sacking bureaucrats. I see.
Well, no, I'm just asking whether you think sacking 9,500 people in one fell swoop is a good idea. First of all, you've got a problem with the unions. Second of all, you're going to have to negotiate what their pay packages are going to be. Thirdly, they're all going to have to go on the dole and then be subsequently, bankrolled by me and you. So it doesn't sound to me like a brilliant move economically.
No, look, this government's pouring money into the NHS. I mean, these people can be redeployed elsewhere. I mean, the problem with the NHS.
So they're not getting fired, then, are they?
Well, yeah, but they're not being agglomerated in a centralised bureaucracy, which is completely wasteful.
I don't even know what these people do. Do you know what they do?
Well, they duplicate most of the functions of the Department of Health, and as Keir Starmer said, that's not a good idea.
Well, he's probably right about that.
Let's move them into managing the NHS.
So what he's doing is he's moving managers from one building into another building.
Well, I think if he's devolving power to hospital trusts, then that's a good idea. And despite a lot of people's preconceptions about the NHS, one of its big problems is it's undermanaged. It doesn't have
I've never heard that before.
Good enough managers.
Well, it might not have good enough managers, but it's definitely not undermanaged. There's layers of management that you wouldn't believe.
Well, absolutely, but they're not constructive. They're not actually doing proper management. They're not actually delivering services.
No, the NHS doesn't work. I think we can all agree that the NHS doesn't work. It's as simple as that, right?
Well, yes, but I think Wes Streeting and Alan Milburn, I'm glad to see him back, the most successful health secretary since the NHS was founded.
In your view,
getting to grips with those problems of delivery.
Yeah, but I mean, it's been a long time coming, and the fact remains that nobody's really sure what any of these people do. And it's like most of these Labour government promises, it's all about what will happen and what will be delivered. It's not about what's actually happening, and it's not about, you've already conceded that 9,500 people are not going to be let go from the NHS. They're going to be redeployed. Now, as far as I understand it, the NHS England headquarters are in Leeds, OK? So I don't know what proportion of those 9,500 people are in Leeds, but if they're all in Leeds, they can't all go and work for the National Health Trust in Leeds, can they?
No, but that's...
So will they have to move and be employed somewhere else, or what?
Well, yeah, but that's a matter of detail, isn't it? I mean,
it's quite a lot of detail.
There's a huge amount of churn in the NHS, but there's money being poured into the NHS. There are new jobs being created in the NHS all the time. The problem in the past has been that they've been the wrong sort of jobs.
Yes.
They haven't actually delivered...
because we don't have enough doctors and we don't have enough nurses.
Yeah, well, those are things that are being worked on as well.
Well, they're not, though.
I mean, I accept it's only 8 months in. You can't expect instant results, but waiting lists are falling.
Well, when would you expect to see growth?
Things are heading in the right direction in the NHS, which has not been the case for a very long time.
Well, they're not really heading in any direction that's any different from where they've always been. They're heading, in the direction of people being... Every day, if I ask for people's stories about the NHS, they tell me stories which are not good. Nothing's changed. And I mean, the last figures that they gave out, they said, don't worry, we've solved the NHS waiting list problem. We've got 2 million more appointments than we had this time last year. Now, this time last year, they were on strike, and they counted...
and now they're not. So that's progress, isn't it?
Well, that cost 23 billion, didn't it? Because the first 23 billion that they gave the NHS in the summer all went to the pay rise of the doctors for 22%.
Your numbers are all over the shop.
They've admitted it. That's what they said. They said they used that money to give a pay rise to the junior doctors. Which is
not
what
all 23 billion.
Yes, it was.
23 billion
that's what they said. Well, that's what they said.
Well, no, sorry. I mean, that's just...
Well, I'll just have to prove you wrong next week when we get the figures.
But Wes Streeting has sorted out the strike, and that's a good thing.
Well, he hasn't sorted out... He hasn't sorted out the Border Force strike, which is apparently going to come up in the next month.
That's not his responsibility.
No, I know that, but what I'm saying is that you know as well as I do, the union system, which is not entirely unconnected to each one of the other unions around the various offices of London, is that, it'll be Border Force next month. 1 month after that, RMT will come back for a bit more.
Yeah.
After that, the junior doctors will probably come back for a bit more. The GPs have been given a settlement. We haven't really even been told how much that costs. So there's going to be a revolving door, I think, of union negotiators going into the government and demanding money, isn't there?
Well, yeah, that's normal. But I mean, you've got to look at the bigger picture in the NHS, which is, I think, it's starting to turn in the right direction. It's going to take a very long time.
I don't know what evidence you've got for that.
It took the Blair government 10 years to get the NHS to the situation where actually people were finally satisfied with a decent level of service, and you didn't have to wait more than
but there's a lot fewer people.
What it was now. It was sort of 18 weeks.
But there was a lot fewer people living here in those days, and that's the other big problem for the NHS, is that the increase in population has put a hell of a strain on it, and there's no point in denying that. But let me ask you this: I think one of the last times we spoke, you told me that Jonathan Reynolds not being a solicitor wasn't a story, didn't you?
I did. Well, I told you it wasn't a very important story.
Yeah.
I said, you
told
I'm
me
glad he's corrected the record, and now we can move on.
Well, I'm not moving on yet because I want to play it to you.
I made a reference to my experience of using our local transport system in Greater Manchester when I worked as a solicitor in Manchester city centre. I should have made clear that specifically, Madam Deputy Speaker, that was a reference at the time to being a trainee solicitor. I would like to formally correct the record.
I'm sorry. I just find these things so amusing. Why can't politicians just behave like everybody else and say, look, I'm sorry, I gave the wrong information. It's been brought to his attention, he says, and that inadvertently he claimed to be something that he was not. No, that's not what happened. What happened was for 10 years he pretended that he had been a solicitor when he wasn't. Why doesn't he just apologise?
Absolutely not true. He said he worked as a solicitor,
he was a trainee solicitor, right?
Yes. So he worked as a solicitor.
Yeah, he wasn't a solicitor.
It was loose language. It doesn't matter.
It does matter. Luke Johnson said that he spent an hour with him once at a dinner where Jonathan Reynolds spent an hour telling him about what it was like when he worked as a solicitor. He's got some kind of pathological problem. So what?
No, well, he worked in a solicitor's office. He worked in the law. What's your problem?
Well, he's not a solicitor. Well, according to the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, it's a criminal offence to pretend to be a solicitor when you're not. That's why it matters.
Yeah, if he passed himself off as a solicitor in order to give you legal advice or to pretend
he may have done. I don't know.
Or to charge you money,
he may have done.
No, well, of course he didn't. He's just loosely talking about his.
He's just a liar then.
His past work.
So he's a liar.
What?
He's a liar, isn't he?
No, I absolutely refuse to accept that. I never used the L word.
All right, well, let's see what he said when he was in Parliament. Let's see what the record is that he was correcting.
Before the last election, I worked as a solicitor in Manchester city centre, and I would travel in to Manchester every day from what is now my constituency.
He travelled into work every day to
exactly
be a solicitor.
what he's just said in his correction.
It's a criminal offence to claim to be a solicitor when you're not.
No, well, I mean,
and he's also likely to be fined by the Solicitors Regulatory Authority.
Yeah, but it only matters if you're trying to pass yourself off.
So getting fined by a professional organisation that you've pretended to be a part of doesn't matter to you, especially if you're a cabinet minister in business.
Absolutely not.
Well, no. I'm afraid you've dropped the bar so low now. I mean, next you'll be hiring Pablo Escobar to run the NHS. Hey?
I don't know. Well,
might do a better job, mind you, than waste treating. You just kill all the dead wood and get rid of it. What else can we talk about? Here's Keir Starmer on farmers from 2023. Let's have a bit of that.
Every day seems to bring a new existential risk to British farming. Losing a farm is not like losing any other business. It can't come back. That's why the lack of urgency from the government, the lack of attention to detail, the lack of long-term planning, it's not on. You deserve better than that.
Yeah, it's on now, isn't it? Hey? I mean, how can these people be so barefaced? Look, I know that all politicians use language and speak untruths, but I don't think I've ever seen people make such hypocritical statements after doing things like that.
That's a very good find, actually. When was that?
He spoke at the National Farmers Union conference in 2023. I think it was December 23.
Right, brilliant. A brilliant illustration of why existential is on my banned list. You should never use the term.
No, it's never a good word, is it? In any situation,
it's a bad word.
But the trouble is with Starmer,
far too absolute. I mean, he's sort of suggesting that the Tory government was about to abolish the farming industry.
Yes,
and then
instead
as we know, what happened next was was that the Labour government tried to make inheritance.
No, I mean, it's almost as though he was sort of faking, like doing a dummy just before he runs past you with the football, because it was actually he who wanted to abolish the farming industry. He wanted to wait till he was in charge so he could do it.
No. Rachel Reeves then tried to make inheritance tax fairer by making farmers pay the same.
Yeah, well, actually, she buggered it up.
Actually, not the same inheritance tax as everybody else. I mean, she was trying to make them pay half of what everybody else pays instead of.
Yeah, but she got her numbers wrong, and she is still being very, very sort of po-faced about that because.
And the farmers, of course, are complaining that that they're suffering an existential threat, which is, of course.
Well, the farmers are saying.
Another illustration of
why the farmers are actually saying, if you look at the figures that we're giving you, and actually look at the figures that DEFRA have got, rather than the ones that you've got from the Treasury, you will find that you can do this in a much fairer way without damaging family farms. But she's still doggedly sticking to her plan instead of just going, OK, well, let's do that then, because she can still then capture the people she's trying to capture, the rich people who are using farms to avoid paying tax, but leave the actual farmers alone. But why won't she do that?
Well, unfortunately, Mike, we agree on that. It's
I'm sorry about that.
It's baffling as to why she won't do the obvious thing, which is to exempt family farms, which is apparently quite straightforward to do in legislation.
Yes.
And as you say, focus on people who use farms as a tax avoidance.
Exactly right. Now, one final question, because I've kept you too long as ever, because it's so enjoyable. But
it's always great fun, Mike.
It is, and I appreciate that you enjoy it as well. The Science Secretary, Peter Kyle, has been accused of using AI chatbot for coming up with government policy. I don't know whether you use AI. I don't. I don't find myself any reason to.
I use it very occasionally for. I mean, I can't remember what it was now, but it did find something for me once.
Did it?
It's sort of like a sort of souped up Google, but extremely reliable.
Well, I'm quite amused by some of the questions that he apparently put into it. I don't know how the Telegraph have got this story, but records have revealed that on one occasion he asked ChatGPT to generate media opportunities. He wrote this: I'm Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology in the United Kingdom. What would be the best podcast for me to appear on to reach a wider audience that's appropriate for my ministerial responsibilities?
Yeah, I wondered how they got hold of the actual prompts.
Yeah.
That is very strange.
Well, it's apparently been obtained by New Scientist magazine. They did it under Freedom of Information laws.
But I'm surprised that actually falls into the scope of
but doesn't that tell you what doesn't that tell you as well what some of the problems with AI might be? That if you are looking for information, so that somebody can obtain what it is that you're looking for.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that's an objection to AI, but
it might be though. Surely it should be confidential, shouldn't it?
It may confirm what Tony Blair always thought, which is that freedom of information law was a disaster.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, if Peter Kyle is playing around with ChatGPT, asking it those sort of questions, and just to see what kind of replies it comes up with, I mean, I mean, I think it is his responsibility as Secretary of State for Science to know how AI chatbots work.
Perhaps you should have asked them, how will it look if I ask you a question and then suddenly it gets published in the Daily Telegraph? I think you look a bit like a numpty, which apparently is not an offensive word, and it's been ruled by a judge, so there we are. John Rentoul, thank you very much indeed, as ever. Very amusing. Andy has got a voice note on the state of Britain.
Hi, Mike. Andy in Portsmouth. I sent you that mural of Carol Vorderman yesterday saying Portsmouth actually wasn't too bad a city for cleanliness, but I'll take that back because I've actually had my eyes open today, and the amount of stuff that's just been fly tipped outside, you know, the Salvation Army skips and bottle banks and clothes banks and stuff is off the scale, really. Yeah, I mean, it looks like Albert Steptoe's yard. So yeah, I think we're all in it, to be honest with you. Wherever you look, in any city in the UK, it's fly tipping central.
Yeah, absolutely. I must admit, when I was in Portsmouth, it didn't strike me as particularly clean. I would put that to you. But I don't think any worse than any other part of the country. They're all really, really bad. Sean in Gloucester said, I'm guessing Keith Starling and his numpties are so keen on AI because they have no human intelligence at all. Yeah, probably. Let's just talk.
It's Plank of the Week with Mike Graham.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. I'm Mike Graham and this, of course, is Talk. I think he was shocked. You could see the genuine shock.
I was like that.
Sees the boats coming in. Right, let's have the women and children first. He went, oh, just you lads, is it? Yeah.
He's been allowed to develop into this huge sort of problem for the BBC. Yeah. He'd love it, wouldn't he?
He would love it. That's why we're not doing it.
That's why we're not doing it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:31. This from Geraldine. She says, Mike, I worked at a solicitor's office for 3 years. I made tea and typed letters. Does that make me a solicitor? Best wishes, Geraldine. Simon says, I am a solicitor and I'm offended by this Reynolds fellow committing a criminal offence. Maybe you should complain to the Solicitors Regulatory Authority and see if they'll do anything about it. One from Debbie, who says in Hawley, Mike, I work in a doctor's surgery, so I'm a doctor. I mean, it is this mad logic, isn't it? How is this not a story? Karen has sent me some updated photos showing polite notice an annoyed resident has added to the fly tip on our small housing estate in Prestbury in Gloucestershire. There's an awful lot of horrible sort of rubbish lying around. You can always get rid of your rubbish so long as you're prepared to give the tip workers a bung, says Mick. And Ernie says, Mike, someone walked past my wheelie bin for non-recyclable waste and put an empty Coke can in it. I got a note saying they couldn't empty 2 weeks of rubbish because it contained recyclable waste that wasn't mine. That is mad, isn't it? And Mike in Glasgow says, the missus and me spend months at a time in Rhodes Town every summer. They have industrial bins on most street corners to use commonly, and without fail they are emptied every night by the council, sometimes during the day as well. Yeah, I think I've seen that. Yeah, I mean, everywhere else you go in the world, they seem to manage their rubbish an awful lot better. I don't know what it is about British people who can't seem to put their litter away properly, and the people who are supposed to empty it can't seem to empty it properly. But anyway, let's talk to Julian Jessup, independent economist, of course, because we need to seek his counsel. Given today's figures, Julian, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
0.1% up, down, roundabout. Doesn't really mean much of anything, does it? It's all a bit flat and boring.
Yeah, well, I don't think the figures were quite as bad as they sound. As you say, the economy shrank by 0.1% in the first month of the year, but that followed a 0.4% jump in December. I think the underlying trend is probably still slightly up. But there's no doubt that the economy is really struggling at the moment. Yeah. And if there is growth, it's very feeble. And in particular, it's well short of the numbers that the independent fiscal watchdog, the OBR, had baked into the forecast for last October's budget. So there's going to be more pressure on the public finances as a result, and a risk that we get a further round of tax increases and poorly targeted spending cuts later this month that prolong the doom loop that we now seem to be in.
Well, that's the trouble, isn't it? Every time you think that something's going to come to the rescue of the economy, something else happens. I mean, I've got this from Liam in Bath. He says, my council tax has come through yesterday and it's gone up £400 a year. They wonder why the economy's dead, but they keep taxing people and we don't have any money. And I think the same is going to go for companies come April when the national insurance hike kicks in.
Well, you're right. I mean, the problem now is that the economy is weak even before the main measures from last October's budget actually kick in. Yes. So you've got the hike in national insurance, but you've got lots of other things going on as well, including the big increase in the national minimum wage, which is great for those people on low pay who keep their jobs, but many will actually lose them, and it adds to the pressure on the hospitality and retail sectors in particular. So I think there's a valid concern that things will actually get worse in April. I was going to say, just talking to people, anecdotally, you get the sense that there's not as much money around. I mean, down at Cheltenham this week, I was talking to a TalkSport reporter down there who said it's not as busy as it normally is. It's still, there's plenty of people there, but it's not quite as many people as last year. Yeah, well, certainly if you look at the numbers that came out today, there are big pockets of weakness even in the services sector. So the hospitality sector, so pubs, restaurants, but also arts and entertainment were very weak at the beginning of the year, and that's sort of consistent with this idea that people are starting to worry about the further pressures to come. I think that the hope might be that what we're seeing now is weakness brought forward. So, firms are very nervous at the moment. It's not just the domestic economy. They're worried about, global trade war and global energy prices going up. So it might be that firms are simply pausing hiring and investment until April is out of the way. And assuming the economy doesn't fall off a cliff, then things will look a lot better in the second half of the year. Yeah. But I wouldn't bet on that. I think the economy is definitely on a knife edge now. Yeah. And we could be due for a prolonged period of not necessarily outright deflation or stagflation, but certainly, an ugly period of stagflation.
Right. I mean, John Renton and I were just talking for an independent there about. He said there's been some quite good activity in the housing market, but I'm pretty sure that's just down to people making sure they do their conveyancing and their selling and buying before the new rules on stamp duty kick in, right?
No, that's right. I mean, the housing market is another pocket of weakness in the economy. There is some sort of temporary distortions from the people bringing forward activity ahead of the stamp duty, but all the signs is that things are going to fall off a cliff thereafter. The housing market is a good example of a sector that's particularly sensitive to the overall state of confidence. Obviously, for most people, buying a house is by far the biggest purchase they'll ever make. And if they're worried about their jobs, they're worried about interest rates being higher for longer, then that's a relatively easy decision to postpone. Yeah. The construction sector itself also was relatively weak in today's numbers. That might partly be bad weather, big sort of seasonal factors here. Yeah. But there are lots of signs that interest rate sensitive sectors more generally are still struggling.
Absolutely right. Julian, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Julian Jessup, independent economist there, without a great deal of hope to look forward to, you'd have to say. Let's ask Rachel Reeves, though, because here's what she said at Labour Party conference last year.
Why is it that the British people put their trust in us for the first time in 5 general elections? It is because, thanks to Keir's leadership, we left no stone unturned to show that Labour is the party of economic responsibility and the party of working people. We were elected because, for the first time in almost 2 decades, people looked at us, looked at me, and decided that Labour could be trusted with their money.
Yeah, how's that going? I'd quite like my money back, please, if I could, before you take even more of it off me. How about this from Lee? The way 2 Tiers says working people makes me want to rip my ears off. I'm not surprised. Unbelievable stuff. It is, says Cooperman, why do you continually run repeated video when you're interviewing? Perhaps, besides having to be subjected to various government idiots, it distracts from the discussion. I would rather see images of bumper stickers. I don't know what you mean, really, by that. You don't like what you're seeing on the screen? Is that what you're saying? We show, pictures of things that have happened before, if that's what you mean. Yeah, that's because it's contextual to what we're talking about. But, if you don't like it, we can change it. We'll just do whatever you want. Just tell us what you'd like to see. If you want to see pictures of bumper stickers, we'll do that instead. Natalie, what do you want to say?
Hi, Mike. Natalie from Cannock. I used to live in Birmingham. Next door but one from me were immigrants. They had a fridge fire in the house because they were overloading on an extension lead. The burnt-out fridge sat on their drive for 28 weeks. I knew it was 28 weeks because this is how long it took us to sell up and move out. I told them to move it. They just said no. It's the council's responsibility. No wonder Birmingham Council is broke. Finally got it moved because I went to see the local councillor who served them papers. This is why we're in a mess. The people coming here who don't work and pay taxes think that everything's free. Thanks, Mike. Great show.
Natalie, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, well, they think everything's free because when they got here, they got everything for free. And that's unfortunately why they think it's free, because for them it is. Lee from Hampshire says, morning, Mike. I went to the tip last weekend and noticed they no longer charge to dump rubble. I asked why the change, and they said because people were dumping it in the stream just outside the tip. I mean, I'm sorry for laughing. Joe says in East Sussex, Mike, my brother was litter picking in his town and someone asked him why was he doing it, as it's the council's job. Just about sums up the attitude out there. Keeping where we live nice is all our jobs. Well, it is. But, I mean, you shouldn't be throwing rubbish in the street in the first place. Howard in Suffolk says, drop litter, £100 on the spot fine, paid by card or arrested until paid. Feet on seat on a train, £100 on the spot fine or arrested until paid. Fly tip prison. Listen, I mean, I wouldn't be against any of those things, because the only way to clamp down on unruly and antisocial behaviour is to make people think twice before they do it. If they don't think there's any reason not to do it, they'll do it, because they're disgusting people. I mean, what sort of person throws rubbish in the street? What sort of person throws rubbish out of a car or out of a train? I mean, it really is quite remarkable. Jan Canterbury says this, on this litter problem, why do we not insist that able-bodied people on benefits go out and clear up some of the mess? And what about the migrants too, those who hang about the streets doing nothing all day? We are paying for their accommodation and other things after all. Yeah, put them all to work. Absolutely right. This is Talk. Coming up, we're going to speak to David Collins later. Also, we're going to find out what's going on in the teaching world, because remember, Labour decided to put VAT on private schools in order to fund 6,500 teachers in the state system. Well, guess what? That hasn't happened either. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to very nearly 8:43. I don't know where the time's going today. It's going really quick as ever. It's been quite a week, by the way. It is Friday. It is Gaff Friday as well. We're going to talk to Dr. Kath Scutt in a moment, Deputy CEO at Chartered College, on the teaching situation. But let's get another gaff from Kevin O'Sullivan.
Welcome to my beautiful home. What do you mean it's not my home? Every morning I pick beautiful flowers from my beautiful garden and I feed them to my beautiful children. So what if you haven't got a garden? I haven't really got any children. I hate bees. Get me out of this bee suit now. I've always loved taking something pretty ordinary and elevating it. You know, like my husband. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle, because it's Meghan Sussex now. It's Meghan Sussex. Meghan Sussex. Meghan Sussex.
I think we might have to get him sectioned. He's gone over the edge. He's been working too much. You know what I mean? Needs a holiday. Let's talk to Dr. Kath Scutt, though, because she is Deputy CEO of Chartered College. You might remember when Rachel Reeves insisted on bringing in the VAT on private schools in January of this year, that the hope was, or the belief was, and certainly the promise was, that we were going to get 6,500 new teachers in state schools. But it doesn't seem to have happened. Dr. Kath, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. So, I mean, I never really believed that this was the result that they were going to get out of this. And it now turns out that they're having to spend even more money in the state system by shipping pupils off to schools 45 minutes and further away from where they live because there are no state school places in a lot of parts of southeast England.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, I think the sort of 6,500 new teachers promise is a little bit of a red herring. We've seen years and years of under-recruitment and worsening retention in the school sector, and the investment in 6,500 new teachers, great. But actually, if we're seeing teachers leaving at the rate that we are, 6,500 new teachers are soon going to be gone. So I think fundamentally there's much, much bigger change that needs to happen. It's easy to kind of pick out those 6,500 new teachers, great stat, but actually that isn't going to make the change that we need in the system.
No. I mean, are there any new teachers as a result of what happened in January?
There absolutely are. There's indications that the kind of activity that's going on is bringing new teachers in, for sure. We're still looking short on recruitment across both primary and a number of secondary subjects, but the impact, for example, of bursaries to attract new teachers into the profession is clear. The concern is how long will those teachers stay for?
Right. Exactly. And as far as, like I say, the VAT kind of receipts, as it were, are not going to be worth as much perhaps as they thought they would be, because it's all going to be offset by millions and millions of pounds that are having to be spent transporting pupils around the country.
Yeah, I think it's a much more complex picture, perhaps, than what's been painted. And I think what is clear is that actually, financial investment is needed if we're going to stop the tide of teachers leaving the profession, and very significant financial investment, which is, what the NFER report suggested yesterday, that if we want to make a change there, the spending review is a crucial point if the government do want to see a real shift in what recruitment and retention look like during their time in Parliament.
And presumably, inevitably, part of that conversation will be, should teachers be paid more money? In which case, if that's going to be happening, how is that going to be funded?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that's the sort of big question, isn't it? The elephant in the room. I think, we know that the sort of appeal of teaching as a profession is a combination of the sense of public benefit. People go into teaching because they want to make a difference. A combination of that with the job satisfaction that they get, with the workload that's required, and with the pay and remuneration for what they do. And at the moment, I think there's some really positive things coming out from the government, some fundamental things about making sure that teachers have access to the CPD they need. Also, a real sense that teachers are being respected in a way that hasn't always been the case historically. But those are sort of fundamentally hygiene factors. Those aren't going to create a dramatic shift. They are going to help over time, but we need a more dramatic shift that comes from making a real difference around workload or pay or both.
And the other thing that I'm hearing is a lot of special educational needs sort of establishments are not surviving this. A lot of them are having to shut down.
Yeah, again, huge challenges around SEND. We've seen huge increases in the number of children and young people being diagnosed with SEND, and the SEND reform is a focus, of course, of the government at the moment as well. One of the things that this is creating, of course, is greater workload for teachers in schools. And one of the problems we're having is where other services are being cut, that has an impact on what schools are expected to do in the scope of teachers' roles.
Yeah, absolutely right. Dr. Kath Scott, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed, Deputy CEO of Chartered College, with the very complex story of putting VAT on private schools and replacing that 6,500 teachers into the state school system with that money. Well, it simply hasn't worked out like that, because of course it hasn't, because nothing that the Labour government says they're going to do they do. Nothing that they say will affect one thing from another will actually happen, and that is really the problem. Don says this: somehow Rachel Reeves has turned the Tories' £22 billion black hole into a £100 billion abyss. Yeah, I think that's about right. Absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, I don't know where it's going to come from in terms of any sort of growth in this economy. Rachel Reeves reporting today that the UK economy contracted by 0.1% in January, and it is on a precipice, as Julian Jessup just told us, The Economist. We are kind of in a 50-50 situation right now. The economy could get an awful lot worse very shortly, as soon as next month. There's a talk.
It's going to be political always. I mean, in a way, it's one of the biggest things the government does, of course, along with national security and education and, keeping the lights on, I suppose, because it affects all of us. We're all going to get ill at some point in our lives, and all of us are going to have family members or close friends are going to get it. So it really matters to all of us because we know that we need it or we're going to need it at some point, And also, we want our loved ones to be well cared for when they get sick or face particular crises in life. So, of course, it's going to be political, and it's going to be main things that can be judged on.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:52. Let's get a voice note from Jeff.
Hi, Mike. Jeff from Malpas in Cheshire. When I was a nipper, my dad bought me a nice lolly, and I took the wrapper off and put it on and just dropped it on the floor. He slapped me on the back of the legs and said, "Pick it up." I said, "Well, there's nowhere to put it." He said, "Take it home." Well, the moral of this story is that if your dad slaps you on the back of the legs, it's not assault, it's a wake-up call. I've never dropped litter ever since.
Yeah, I think many people who were of your generation were taught not to drop litter in the same way. Keith from York here, he says, just listen to Reverse Gear Kia's announcement about the disbanding of NHS England and the launch of yet another soundbite, arm's length body. If I had an arm's length body, how long before the NHS could treat me for it? Very good. I'd be better off joining the circus. Thank you very much indeed. And Pam says, if foreign prisoners were deported, any foreign person deported as soon as they were found guilty, it would act as a deterrent and crime would go down. Of course, this all starts with the ECHR, but what about the rights of Brits to live in a safer society? Well, exactly right. I mean, we've just heard the story today, and we're talking to Robert Jenrick in the next hour. We'll find out from him what he makes of it. Judge Abid Mahmood has said that a fraudster, a convicted Ghanaian criminal called Samuel Frimpong, should be allowed to come back to Britain after being deported in 2013 for attempting to circumvent the Home Office's leave to remain rules because he's depressed, misses his family, who are apparently still here. So he's allowed to come back and live with them. Madness. Let's talk to David Collins, Professor of International Economic Law at the City St George's University of London. Very good morning to you, sir.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about Donald Trump today. He's threatened a 200% tariff on European alcohol, which is in response to the EU's 50% tax on US whiskey. I suppose it's bound to happen. There's a lot of toing and froing going on here. There's not quite sure whether Trump's using these tariffs as a threat or whether he's actually going to put them on.
It's really complicated, very messy. We have no idea what he's going to do. The markets are in turmoil. We're really not sure. My sense is that he's doing it as a negotiating tactic. Right. So what he's really looking for is some kind of a trade deal.
Yeah. Yeah, it would seem so. I mean, he's previously said that the EU was basically sort of created to damage America and to do harm to America, and he says they do a great job. But the point is that he says there's a $350 billion deficit in trade because they don't buy anything that's American. What's he going to do about that?
Well, I wouldn't be too concerned about the deficit. I think that's a bit of a red herring because that just reflects the fact that America has quite a strong bargaining power in terms of their purchasing ability. Right. What his genuine concern is, the EU does impose high tariffs on a lot of things, famously cars, 10% tariff. Another thing is agricultural products, something like 8%. We suffered from that when we were in the EU. So he definitely has some justification in his complaints. Digital services taxes, something else.
I mean, it's funny, isn't it, that all the people that complain about tariffs actually use them themselves?
Yes, absolutely. But of course, there's good ways to use tariffs and bad ways. And what you should do really is you should commit to the tariffs you're going to apply and then stick with them. And that's the World Trade Organization rule. It's right there in the GATT. You can't just run around willy-nilly and start imposing tariffs as you feel like. You've got to stick to your commitments.
Yeah. And as far as the sort of commercial relationship, if you like, between the UK and the United States. I mean, Keir Starmer finds himself in a bit of between a rock and a hard place, really, doesn't he? Because he doesn't want to be critical of Donald Trump because he thinks he's his big mate, but at the same time, he doesn't appear to wield any influence over him.
Yeah, he certainly is in a difficult position, and in a way, I'm quite sympathetic. And you can see the same thing in Canada and Australia. I don't have much time for Keir Starmer. I'm certainly no fan of his, but I think right now, maybe holding off on the reciprocal tariffs might be the best move to see if there may be some chance that the UK can get an exemption from these steel and aluminum tariffs.
Yeah, which I'm sure will come. But again, Donald Trump's very cute about these things. He likes to use carrot and stick, kind of, doesn't he, in terms of getting what he wants. And he certainly, I'm imagining, still wants that state visit, and he still wants to come and visit Britain as and when he feels like it.
Exactly. You've got to give him something. And I think Starmer was absolutely right to offer him the royal visit. I mean, this is why we have all these castles and horses and that. Let's give him the royal visit. If that's what he likes, and he admires the royal family, then bring him over, and then maybe we'll get an exemption from the steel and aluminum tariff. So I think that's probably a good move.
Maybe. I mean, I'd be more concerned about those of us who pay for the royal family who actually never get to see them, and it's all being offered to somebody who obviously is a very influential individual. But yeah, I mean, it's a strange situation that Starmer finds himself in, because it's all gone a bit quiet on the Ukraine front for Starmer as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, we don't know what's going to happen with that. And then now it looks like this negotiated ceasefire may not actually happen. See, it's going to end up that Putin's not as easy to negotiate with as Trump has alluded to. Yeah. And I think Starmer's grandstanding about sending troops is ridiculous, frankly. I mean, the country just doesn't have the manpower for that, and that's the result of all these years of underfunding the military, and it's really just puts the UK in an embarrassing situation.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Thanks very much indeed for talking to us. David Collins there, Professor of International Economic Law at City St George's University of London. How about this from Steve, who says, Mike, are the NHS being cute here? 2 people have told you they've been on the waiting list, then had an appointment sent, only for it to be cancelled shortly afterwards. How is that logged? Does that go into the system as a reduction in the number of appointments? Is it more smoke and mirrors with the waiting lists? Great show as always. And Steve is in Melbourne. And one here from someone who doesn't give a name. I also had an appointment with a surgeon, but it was in 16 months' time. And guess what? They cancelled it the following week due to unforeseen circumstances with no date given for a new appointment. You see, that's the thing. It's really quite interesting how these statistics are collected, because if you get an appointment, does that mean that disappears off the waiting list? And then if you get that appointment cancelled, do you go back on the waiting list, or is there a further waiting list that you join? That's what nobody seems to know. Let's get a voice note from John.
Mike, John here from Derbyshire. I had to laugh at John Rentoul. Absolutely no idea about the NHS. I did a governor's job there. The bureaucracy, waste and nonsense, and actual people in management jobs on 6-figure salaries that reported to nobody. In fact, they didn't even come in, because nobody was challenging them what they were actually doing. Yeah. And the NHS is full of that type of character. Unless you've been in it, he hasn't got a Scooby-Doo. Yeah. Have a good weekend, Mike.
John, thanks for the information. Yeah, I mean, I speak to people who are in the NHS in all sorts of different roles, some of them in the medical side of it, some of them in the management side of it, and they tell me exactly what John just said, that there's a huge, huge raft of people who seem to do very little of anything, if anything at all. And when they don't do anything, nobody really asks them why they haven't done anything, because it's not built like that. Callum says this morning, Mike, talking of cleaning up Britain, as a dog owner, the pavements seem to be covered in glass fragments these days, and no councils or anyone else seem bothered to clear it up. I haven't noticed that particularly, but I'll take your word for it. Coming up in the next hour, Robert Jenrick's going to join us. Mark McDonald, also the barrister for Lucy Letby. There's a development in that story. This is Morning Glory.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament. to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 9. It is bright out there, but it's not looking terribly sunny. I don't know what it's like where you are. Very cold as well. It was 1 degree when I came out of the house this morning. But it is going to be, I think, a reasonable weekend for all intents and purposes. The rugby's on. Cheltenham Gold Cup Day today, of course, which is going to be very busy. Nigel Farage down there. That story for reform seems to have gone a bit quiet lately. So we'll see whether we get into that in the final hour of the show. Robert Jenrick's here as well, Shadow Justice Secretary. He's been very active on a whole range of stories, which we're going to ask him about. Not least the UN judge who forced a young woman into slavery and broke our immigration laws. She's been found guilty. That was yesterday. Also, we'll be talking to him about the dreadful state of Jonathan Reynolds and how he has to really do something a little bit more than just claim that he inadvertently said that he was a solicitor when he actually wasn't. Unbelievable stuff. And also, two-tier policing, two-tier sentencing. Robert Jenrick, I'm sure, will have plenty to say about all of that. Plus, the UK economy contracting by 0.1% in January. At the end of the day, there's no growth. There's no sign of any growth. I mean, there isn't even any sign of the G at the beginning of the word. There's nothing going on. It is absolutely flat. And people are more worried than ever about what happens in April when national insurance kicks in, the rises to all the big companies, what the companies are going to do, whether people are going to be laid off. Of course, we've also got the NHS story to talk about as well. It claims that he's going to get rid, Starmer, that is, the Prime Minister, of 9,500 people from NHS England. He says he's going to abolish it and they're all going to be out of a job. Well, are they really? He's not going to sack 9,500 people. I don't think he's got the cojones to do that. 0344 499 1000. We're also talking about the state of Britain, what it looks like, how filthy and litter-strewn it is, absolutely disgraceful. And here's a voice note from Malcolm.
Morning, Mike. It's Malcolm here from sunny Devon, but I'm in Wiltshire. Just want to say, great show, and can you give a big shout-out to Big Steve-O in his truck, my son-in-law. Cheers!
That's very nice of you, Malcolm. I'm glad you're in Wiltshire. It's a lovely part of the world, as is Devon, in fact. But I'm not going to give him a shout-out because that would just cause all sorts of ructions. It's Greatest Hits Radio that does that sort of thing. It's not the home of common sense, which is, of course, Morning Glory every single morning, right here from 6 to 10. But I do wish you both well. How about that? It's 5 minutes past 9. Let's get it on. Howard says this morning, Mike, Rachel Reeves, not a plan for change, just change the plan, says Howard in Suffolk. And Andy in Chatham says this, I think I'd settle for the low growth rather than the no growth that we currently have. I know, it's trouble, isn't it? It's a real problem. The economy is going down the gurgler faster than you can say Rachel Thieves. Let's talk to Robert Jenrick, Shadow Justice Secretary. Robert, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Thanks very much for joining us. So much to talk about really this morning. Shall we kick off with Jonathan Reynolds? Because I know you've been tweeting about it. It's a couple of days old now. But, you know, how does this guy get away with pretending to be a solicitor, which is apparently a criminal offence? He's probably going to be fined by the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. And he has to get up in the House of Commons to correct the record in which he says, I inadvertently told you a lie. But he doesn't actually call it a lie. I mean, you want him to apologise, right?
Well, I want him to be prosecuted by the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. I think he's lied over and over again. He misled the House of Commons, for which he's now apologised, but in a very mealy-mouthed way. He put on his election leaflets purporting to his electorate at a general election that he was a solicitor when he wasn't. He put it on his LinkedIn account. He's put it on his website. Over and over again, this man has lied about his professional qualifications, holding himself out to be something that he isn't. I think that's a really serious matter, and it is a criminal offence. And Keir Starmer says that he's a lawyer, that he believes in the rule of law, that standards matter. Well, he knows that Jonathan Reynolds has broken the law, so he should do the right thing and tell him to leave the cabinet.
I can't believe that he hasn't done that, to be honest. I mean, but he does have a record, doesn't he, Starmer, of hanging on to people for as long as he possibly can. And if he lost another cabinet minister soon in his premiership, it would look like he was a bit incompetent, wouldn't it?
Well, as with lots of things with Keir Starmer, it's always two-tier. For his mates, the ministers who he has some friendship with, whether it's Jonathan Reynolds or when we had the so-called anti-corruption minister who was actually being looked into for corruption charges in Bangladesh. He hangs on to those people for a long time. Others who he doesn't care so much about, he sacks straight away, like Louise Haigh, the failing Transport Secretary. With Jonathan Reynolds, he's broken the law, he's banged to rights. I hope the Solicitors Regulatory Authority takes action against him. I've given them a dossier of evidence which is very clear, including illegal. We've given them opinions from leading lawyers which have said that absolutely he's on the wrong side of the law. So Keir Starmer should do the right thing and sack Jonathan Reynolds and uphold basic standards. You shouldn't be in the cabinet of this country and lie on your CV. You wouldn't get away with that in the real world, would you? People listening to this show wouldn't be able to do that. In their working lives, you certainly shouldn't be sat around the cabinet table if you're faking your CV.
No, exactly right. And let's talk a bit about the two-tier justice system as well, which you've been mentioning on and off this week. You've got the case up in Oxford where police have ended their investigation into some damage to a Balfour portrait because they say, presumably, that it doesn't reach the threshold of their prosecution, indicators.
Yeah, I thought this was a clear example of two-tier justice. You know, if you say something on Twitter, you might get the police knocking on your door, as happened to leading journalists recently like Alison Pearson. And yet here you've got a vandal who, in plain sight, filming it herself, slashes a painting at Cambridge University, and yet 1 year on the police seem to have done absolutely nothing about it. I'm astonished they haven't managed to track this person down, that they've not been prosecuted and not in jail right now. That sends a terrible signal, and my worry is that this is the police and institutions like Cambridge kowtowing to people who hate our country. It sends out a message that if you've got a fashionable left-wing cause, nothing's going to happen to you, but for everybody else, you're going to get banged to rights. Yeah, because that's wrong. That's not the system that I want to see.
No, we were watching earlier today Caroline Leavitt in the White House. She's this incredible White House press spokeswoman. I don't know whether you've seen her in action, but she was answering a question about a guy called Mahmoud Khalil, who's a student at Columbia University, who's got a green card, so he's got the right to live in America, the right to stay there, a resident alien. They're kicking him out of the country because he took part in some anti-Israel protests at Columbia University, distributing pro-Hamas material. She said, you've got a privilege to be in this country, and if you break the law, we're going to kick you out of the country. It's such a great message, and it's what we need here, isn't it?
Look, absolutely. When I was immigration minister, I started to do precisely the same. I believe very strongly that if you're here on a visa, you're a visitor in our country.
Yeah.
That is a privilege. It's not a right. And if you don't uphold basic British values, if you lionise Hamas and terrorist organisations, you should be kicked out. And frankly, you should never step foot on British soil again. And I started to do that. I revoked the visas of 2 individuals who were falling well below the standards we should expect, one of which was a student at Manchester University.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they then appealed, and activist judges in the High Court upheld their claim, and I believe they're still here in the UK. That's totally wrong. It sends out completely the wrong message. If you come to this country, respect our way of life, respect our values. Otherwise, you can get out and never come here again.
I mean, this is the problem. We do a thing more or less called Migrant of the Day here, because there's a story a day like this now. Today's one is about a Ghanaian man called Samuel Frimpong, who's apparently been deported back in 2013 for attempting to circumvent the Home Office's leave to remain rules. He's a convicted fraudster. He went back to Ghana to live, but apparently, because he's been separated from his family, he's become depressed, and so he's allowed to come back and live with them.
Yeah, look, there are offensive and ludicrous cases arising almost every day, and this is incredibly frustrating. It has to come to an end. That's why we've got to reform our human rights laws so that we can kick these people out of our country. It's not right that illegal migrants are coming here and we're unable to deport them. It's not right that there's 12,500 foreign criminals in our prisons, paedophiles, rapists, murderers, who we can't get out of our country. We've got to do the tough reforms that are necessary to fix the system and ensure that we have strong borders and our human rights laws aren't being flagrantly abused by migrants and others.
Right, and I was just reading this morning that apparently coming up next on the sort of horizon is a strike by Border Force, not just the Border Force people in the Home Office kind of sitting behind desks, but actually the guys who are on the boats bringing the migrants in from the smaller boats. I'm wondering if that might actually be an improvement.
Well, look, the last time that there was a strike by Border Force, when I was the immigration minister, we got the army in to run our airports, and productivity actually improved. The queues were shorter because the young men and women from the armed forces, paid less than the Border Force officers, actually did a better job. So I would urge Border Force to see sense. It's a really important job, actually, securing our borders. They should take their responsibilities seriously, because we can't afford to have open borders, to be letting dangerous criminals into our country. We've got to ensure this is properly resolved as quickly as possible, and I hope that Yvette Cooper will bring that to an end.
Well, you'd like to think so, but there's no sign of it. And just one final one, Robert, on the economy. It's contracted 0.1% in January. I mean, it's pretty much flatlining. There isn't much hope on the horizon. Economists are telling me that, you know, we're sort of on a knife edge now economically, and things could get really bad.
Look, I think the news we heard today is very worrying and concerning. It's a direct result of the decisions that Rachel Reeves made in that disastrous budget back in the autumn. The Labour government inherited an economy which was the fastest growing in the G7. Inflation was on target at 2%. Interest rates were on the way down. Unemployment was under control. And now you're seeing an economy where everything is going in the wrong direction. Inflation is rising, growth is down. You know, critical parts of the economy like manufacturing, construction are now declining, and that's because confidence in the economy has taken a massive hit as a result of Rachel Reeves talking down the economy and hiking taxes, in particular the national insurance rise. That's meant that almost every business that I speak to is now looking at laying off staff.
Yeah.
There's going to be an emergency budget in 12 days' time where Rachel Reeves is being forced to come back to Parliament because of the decisions that she's made in the past. I'd really urge her to bring forward genuine pro-growth policies now, to look at reversing the tax rises that she's put in place and to change course.
Well, it would be good if she would listen to somebody, because I don't know who she's listening to at the moment. But, Robert, thank you very much indeed. Have a great weekend. Robert Jenrick, MP, Shadow Justice Secretary there, on a great many things. Let's get a quick voice note from Andy on the depressed Ghanaian.
Morning, Mike. Andy from Preston here. This story you've been running this morning about the Ghanaian fraudster who had been deported years ago and has been allowed to just waltz back into the country because of his right to a family life makes my blood boil. As a law-abiding British national who had a wife who was born overseas and a child who was born overseas, I had no right to the same family life that he has. I had to pay just shy of £20,000, jump through hoops, provide documents, and prove that I had a certain level of income before we were allowed to even start the process. So have we got a two-tier immigration system as well that penalises British nationals? Seems so. Have a good weekend, mate.
It does seem so, Andy, doesn't it? Absolutely everything seems to be two-tier now in this country. It's absolutely and utterly ridiculous. We'll come back to that as a theme. Let's talk now, though, to Mark McDonald, barrister for Lucy Letby. She's on the front pages again this morning because her former hospital colleagues may face prosecution in connection with the deaths, which seems to me, and to an awful lot of people, a rather significant development. So let's find out from Mark precisely what it's all about. Mark, a very good morning to you.
Morning. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. I mean, this does seem like an important development, as I say. I mean, tell us about it. What's going on?
Well, I mean, the press release happened yesterday afternoon, and it's slightly ambiguous press release because they don't point any fingers at anybody in the hospital. It could be doctors, it could be consultants, it could be managers. We don't know. But what concerns me is the timing of this press release, because they're saying that they're launching an investigation. They probably won't be interviewing until at least the summer of year, so months and months away. So why is it that now, on a sort of Thursday evening at 6 o'clock, have they released this press release?
Yeah.
On Monday, at the thorough inquiry, they're going to hear final submissions from all parties, including those representing the past senior managers of the trust and also doctors. They are asking, certainly some of the parties, and there's been legal submissions and the police know about this, are asking for the thorough inquiry to stop and have all the expert evidence that I've assessed over that I've put together over the last 6 assessed and looked at by the CCRC. Because if we are right, then millions are being spent on an inquiry that's not actually going to get to the truth. Now, we have this legal argument on the Monday. We know that people won't be interviewed and investigations won't be happening until at least the end of summer. So why is it, just before this legal argument, the police are trying to control the narrative? What is it? Why is it that the police have a media department that are issuing press releases? These are our police. Our police that should be on the streets looking and protecting our society from crime. And they have a media department and are issuing press releases. Are they trying to control a narrative before a very important legal argument? That's my concern. It's the timing. And why are they going about this? And this is what happened in the early stages, and indeed all the way through the trial with Lucy Letby. Remember, Mike, and you may not have picked up on this, but on the eve of the trial of Lucy Letby, the longest criminal trial in UK history, the police called a press conference with all the media in a local court and gave them a briefing. What are they doing?
Yeah.
Why are the police doing this on the start of the trial? And you know, the person who signed off on this press release, I think Detective Constable, I don't know if it's Detective Constable, Detective Inspector, I should know, Hughes, has been on documentaries and has been speaking about it, in videos about it. I don't understand what's in their mind.
Yeah, because if anybody else had done that on the eve of a big trial like that, they'd have probably tried to do them for contempt of court or something, wouldn't they? And they would have said, well, you might be affecting the outcome of the trial.
I don't know. I mean, Peter Hitchin has been doing quite a lot of investigation into this and exactly what's been going on. If you feed his article, if you follow his articles and his tweets, you'll see that he's been trying to probe away at why, because the defence weren't invited.
Right.
Defence weren't told, as far as I know.
Yeah, we speak to Peter once a week on this show, and we've spoken to him an awful lot about this case, obviously, and he's very even-handed about it. He's not saying Lucy Letby's innocent. He just says, you know, I think there's definitely enough reason now to have another trial. Absolutely no question.
The conviction, if all these experts, I have now 23 separate experts from 8 different countries who have drafted reports, you know, quite detailed reports, acting pro bono, those reports are correct, then these convictions are unsafe. And this matter needs to go to the Court of Appeal very quickly. So why are, and the real question is, why are the media department of a police force sending out press releases?
I mean, what do you think they're doing it for? Why would they do it? I mean, I see that Detective Superintendent Paul Hughes, who is the senior investigating officer of Cheshire Police, has said that all the suspects in this manslaughter inquiry have been notified, but no arrests have yet been made, which is also a bit odd, isn't it?
No arrests have been made. That means that they've got to be interviewed.
Yeah.
Those interviews are unlikely to take place before the summer. So to me, the question is the timing. On the eve of important legal submissions going before the Thurgood inquiry, and he knows this. He knows what's happening next week in the Thurgood inquiry. He knows that there's an application to stop the Thurgood inquiry to consider all the evidence. Why is it that they're doing it now? Yeah. They could have waited a week and done this, given that they're not going to interview for months. So my concern is, are they trying to control the narrative? And what on earth are the police playing at if they're trying to control a narrative around an important case like this?
Yeah. It's a very good question. I don't know the answer to it. I can't imagine what it would be. But, yeah, I guess we'll be speaking again, I'm sure, on this, because perhaps all will become clear at some point. But it's a sort of... It's almost like a kind of death of a thousand cuts, isn't it? It's, you know, it seems to be taking forever to get anywhere with this at all.
Well, I mean, we've now been looking closely at the start of this police investigation, and looking at the actions of the police right at the beginning, and there are question marks about what's been happening here. I can't say any more than that. It's a matter for the CCRC and maybe later to the Court of Appeal. But they know the spotlight's on them, and now they're issuing a press release.
Yeah, interesting.
It's deeply concerning.
Very interesting. Yeah, Mark, very good to talk to you again. Thank you. Mark MacDonald, a barrister for Lucy Letby, on the news that the police have made it clear that Lucy Letby's former hospital colleagues could face prosecution in connection with the deaths of the babies in that hospital. Very strange development indeed. It's 22 minutes past 9. Coming up later on, we'll be talking to Rupert Bell about not only Meghan's new podcast, but about Prince William's love for Aston Villa, which will be something very close to Rupert's heart. He's an Aston Villa fan as well. Plus, next we've got Lord Norman Warner, former Labour Health Minister. We'll find out what he makes of Keir Starmer's plan to abolish NHS England.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:26. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10. Of course, Alex Phillips will be here then. We've got Plank of the Week tonight. She's on that as well. This from someone who doesn't give a name. I just had a 40% increase on my water bill, Severn Trent Water. Thanks, Labour. I don't recall receiving a 40% pay rise this year. And Simon in Devon says, when Reeves pushes the economy into recession, expect to hear Trump tariffs, Ukraine war, global headwind, and of course, the £22 billion black hole, anything but her useless amateur hour budgetary policies. But we're going to talk very shortly to Lord Norman Warner, former Labour Health Minister. We'll find out what he makes of the proposed abolition of NHS England. First, though, it's Gaff Friday, so here's one from Jeremy Kyle.
Firstly, before we go on about Farage, I mean, come on, about you and Mike Graham. I mean, you two love each other or something. I mean, you can't say these sort of things, that if it wasn't for Mike Graham, we wouldn't have Talk TV. Come on. That's gone a bit too far.
Argue the toss with me about it, because I'll take you on.
Well, it's easy. There are other people that work for Talk TV. I mean, you.
I'm sure there are, but Mike Graham is the epicentre of. I'm sure there are, but Mike Graham is the very reason that I am here, and I love the bones of him. So stuff it.
All I can say is that when you get your little daffodil and you go, "Do you love me? Do you love me not?" I mean, come on, let's stop talking silly. There's more people at Talk TV than Mr. Graham. He's a nice chap. So there's all of you. You all play your part. Okay?
No, it's all about Mike. Crack on.
Very funny. Some of the people that call into this station are absolutely brilliant. Quick one for you, by the way. The first poll for the Runcorn and Helsby by-election since Mike Ainsbury threw in the towel will make happy reading for reform. This is according to Guido Fawkes. It's a small poll, by the way. It's less than 1,000 people that they've actually asked. But according to the 702 odd people that they've asked, Reform are ahead with 40% to Labour's 35%. Amongst those certain to vote, the gap widens. Reform leads with 45% to Labour's 33%. And these are polls by Lord Ashcroft. Fascinating. Well, of course, that by-election will be here and covered very, very well right here on Talk. Let's talk now, though, to Lord Norman Warner, former Labour Health Minister, because the big news on a lot of the front pages today, of course, is what Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer announced yesterday, basically going to abolish NHS England. Lord Norman, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. Is this a good idea?
Excellent idea. I've been advocating getting rid of NHS England for the last 2 to 3 years.
Right.
They've become like a trade body for the NHS, always lobbying for more money and trying to regulate, really, the pace of change which the NHS makes. And, we live in turbulent times, and the NHS does have to change, reform dramatically. And I think NHS England has got in the way, really. And I think that's, at the end of the day, Wes Streeting has just lost patience with them. Understandably, I believe.
Although he sort of suggested, when we saw him interviewed yesterday, that it wasn't something he had planned to do when he came in as Health Secretary. It seems as though maybe Keir Starmer's kind of persuaded him it's a good idea, because it's not clear what's going to happen to the 9,500 people that work there. I mean, I don't suspect that they're all going to be put on the dole, are they?
Well, I think they're going to probably try to absorb a few in other parts of government. But I think he's got to get down to... I mean, they've ballooned their staff over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it was never agreed at the beginning when Andrew Lansley made the reforms that it would become such a big organisation. Right. I mean, it's got 9,000 or 10,000 more people than we used to run the NHS with. Right. And we always used to have the NHS chief executive in the department. So the change...
So what do they all do then?
Well, God only knows. I think they probably duplicate a very large amount of the policies coming out of the Department of Health. And my sense is they kind of take a view about how fast the NHS can change. And ministers are usually much more impatient about the change than they are. Right. But they have, I mean, since the May government, they've lobbied for very, very big increases in the budget of the NHS.
Yes, and the budget of the NHS has increased, hasn't it? I mean, there's so much money going into it now that some of it just disappears. I mean, 23 billion went in the summer, and that was largely eaten up by giving a pay rise to the junior doctors. So it doesn't go as far as it used to, I suppose you would say.
Well, I mean, we could debate whether some of the pay rises for doctors were justified. That's a separate issue. Yeah. But what we don't see is the performance of the NHS improving as a result of the extra investment that the government's putting in. Yeah. And I think that's why Streeting wants to be re-elected in 4 or 5 years' time. He can see that this is going nowhere. Yeah. And I think it was a mistake. And at some point or another, when you make a big mistake in government, you've got to take the bull by the horns and make the changes.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's right, and I think the Labour government would be well placed to take that advice actually from you, Lord Norman, because they seem to be not quite willing to admit that they've made mistakes at the moment. You know, Rachel Reeves has got a budget coming up, a mini budget, if you want to call it that, in about 12 days' time, and nobody's very sure what she's going to say. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what she's going to say or what she's going to be able to do to create a kind of, a slightly better economic outlook for the future.
No, I mean, the fiscal position is extremely difficult, but partly of her own making. Right. I mean, I used to be a member of the Labour Party, but I do think that some of the decisions that have been taken have let Labour box itself into a corner.
Yeah. I mean, are you surprised that it's a Labour government that's doing this abolition of the NHS England? Because I was thinking this morning, if the Tories had tried to do this, there'd be all sorts of hell to pay and people would be accused of selling it off and all the rest of it.
Well, it was, of course, the Tories' mistake to set it up in the first place.
Yes, right.
I mean, this was Andrew Lansley's doing. Yeah. Cameron and Lansley put that in place. And the idea, as they saw it, was to take the NHS out of politics. Yeah. Well, you've got to have been living on another planet if you think you can take the NHS out of politics. You can't take it out of politics. Right. At the end of the day, ministers are going to rise or fall by their record on the NHS. And that's the way the public views it, not surprisingly.
Yes, and unfortunately the public can't be convinced by any politician about how the NHS is running because they use it every day. They see how it works. They see how it doesn't work. They know how difficult it is to get an appointment with a GP. They know how hard it is to get a procedure done without waiting for months and months on end. So you can't pull the wool over their eyes on the NHS really because they see it in action.
Well, one of the big mistakes I think that's come about as a result of the Lansley changes is a neglect of general practice. Yeah. And general practice is 95% of the public's interaction with the NHS. So if you let that decline as it has declined under NHS England's time, you're going to get a lot of criticism from the public because they rely on the GP services in many ways much more than they rely on the hospital services.
Yes, indeed. And that's the point. I mean, even when you fix that sort of first step, if you like, and people can get to see a doctor for a referral to get something else, then there's a second waiting list for the next bit.
Well, I think when people are sick, They want to know what's causing the problem. What they want is a diagnosis quickly.
Yeah.
They may accept it's reasonable to wait for treatment, but they want the certainty of knowing what the problem is. And that has got worse and worse, I think, over the last 10 to 12 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see whether it makes any difference. I mean, presumably it will take a while for all of this to feed through the system, but I was asking the question earlier to a couple of other guests of what, if you're the sort of head of an NHS trust this morning, waking up, are you thinking it's all going to change soon and it's all going to be so much better, it's going to be great, or are you going to be a bit more sanguine about it?
I think you're going to be quite nervous.
Yeah.
These changes are big changes and they take time to work out and work through the system. And I suspect in many parts of the NHS this morning, there will be a level of nervousness about what's coming.
Indeed. Lord Norman Warner, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Kenny from Edinburgh says, Mike, hi, a Ghanaian fraudster is allowed back because he's depressed. He's just the latest in a long line of people taking the mickey. There's no way our government can actually support this kind of thing. The two-tier Kia party is terrible but not stupid. So why are they allowing this rubbish to happen? The UK desperately needs to tell chances like this to beat it. Absolutely. Karen in Derby, on the subject of litter, says, I'm convinced that litter and general messiness of our streets, verges and motorways is linked to depression. It is also dispiriting. How much are motorway services companies paid? They should lose their contracts if they don't keep the roads clean. Councils have given up sweeping road islands, road signs are filthy, bent signs not replaced. It's all so depressing. Well, it is, isn't it? Also, it doesn't help that you've got roadworks going on everywhere, because that actually creates another eyesore. Wherever you go, there's like huge signs that say road closed. There's those horrible orange and white fences. I mean, the whole look of Britain looks like a state in decline. It looks like a country which is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. That's what it looks like to me. The state of the nation, ladies and gentlemen, is not good. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a voice note from Shane.
Hiya, Mike. It's Shane here. How do you expect the general public to do the right thing when you've got people in places of authority, like Rachel Reeves and John Reynolds, who gain an advantage by deception, get away with it? To me, I think that they should be punished even harder than the average person, because they should be setting an example for the rest of us. Cheers, mate. Have a great day.
Yeah, Shane, you're absolutely right. I think incredibly correct that, because, people who should know better, people who are in positions of responsibility, like Reynolds, who's a Minister of State, like Rachel Reeves, Chancellor of the Exchequer, you can't just get into doing a job by telling a load of fibs about what you used to do. And that's being kind to them. Shane's right. They should be held to a higher standard. Let's have that kind of two-tier system where politicians actually can't get away with as much as they get away with. That would make sense. It's 9:37.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 9:40. Alex Phillips will be here just before 10 o'clock to tell us what's coming up on the show. We've got some royal news for you this morning, the front page of The Sun, and the first 6 or 7 pages of it, actually, all about Prince William giving an interview to Sean Custers, head of sport of The Sun, why I fell in love with Villa, a Royal World exclusive. And it comes on the day that we learn that Meghan Markle, née Sussex, or whichever way round you want to do it, is going to put out another podcast series called Confessions of a Female Founder. Well, there's only one man that can talk to us about this, and that is, of course, the one and only Rupert Bell, Talk's royal correspondent, who I believe is down in Cheltenham. Rupert, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Yes, and good to see that Villa are getting plenty of publicity. I'm an Aston Villa season ticket holder, so I'm fully aware of the future King's passion for Aston Villa, which is long-standing, and he really is a genuine fan. He tries to get to as many matches as his schedule allows. He was at the game on Wednesday night. He's gone to a couple of our away legs, so I'm sure he'll be looking forward to the quarter-final where Aston Villa, that is, play Paris Saint-Germain. So,
did you ever think you'd utter those words? The quarter-final where Aston Villa play Paris Saint-Germain.
You're absolutely right. I didn't. Given about 2.5 years ago, this is fantasy land for all Villa fans, including the future King. We're on a roller coaster at the moment, and it's a great place to be.
And a good thing about his attendance at these football matches as well is that he sits just in a regular seat, doesn't he? He doesn't, no sort of royal box for him, unlike Keir Starmer, who says that because of security reasons he has to be, hidden away.
No, he does sit sort of near the hospitality areas because, let's be quite clear, there's security implications for him.
Yes.
And I know the club have to make sure that he's genuinely not very far. I've just been actually speaking to someone here at Cheltenham who sits in the same sort of area I do, and he said he's just behind me. He is a genuine fan, given his love for the club. But obviously there are security implications. But when you see him actually, he gets really engaged in the match, and he sort of lets everything else he's got to think about go by the window for the 90 minutes. And hopefully I'll be seeing him in Munich when we get to the final.
Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? It would be a lovely sort of fitting end to the season, which has been quite a remarkable one. I suppose there'll be one person this morning, though, who's not all that happy with the coverage, and that will be one of those people in Montecito, California. Another Meghan podcast is coming out called Confessions of a Female Founder. She now calls herself just Meghan, so she's kind of adopted the Madonna one-name style.
Well, according to a cooking programme, she's Meghan Sussex.
Yes. Well, not on the podcast label. She's just Meghan.
Well, this is going to be her interviewing, so it says, leading female business owners and discovering their journey. Well, if you listen to the Archetypes one that she produced before, it was basically her sort of talking and not engaging with her guests. She's got to change this. The way of approaching it and actually trying to get something out of the people. She's not particularly good at that. You even see it in the cooking programme. It's all about her, and the guests were never really felt as if they were part of it. It was just her telling them what she does. What she's got to make sure, it's got to be better than the last lot, which was incredibly dull. When you think she had the quality of person like Serena Williams on it, and you think that is a good hit, that's a big booking. But actually, it turned out to be extremely dull. We could have got some fascinating insights into the Serena Williams psyche, but no, it never went like that. And these programs, Lemonada, it's been a long time in the making. I'm not holding my breath that this will transform the podcast landscape.
No.
But I know that when it comes out, I think relatively soon, that I will have to listen to it on your behalf, Mike.
Of course. And the good thing about being on this show, Rupert, is you never know where you're going to end up. I don't know whether you heard the news this week, but we made it onto Entertainment Tonight in the US of A. Have a look at this.
This feels like a new chapter that I'm so excited that I get to share.
Her new lifestyle show, With Love, Megan, dropped today on Netflix, and it's a make-or-break moment. Will it solidify her brand or just give her critics more fuel?
These are not original ideas.
It's all so pathetic. It really is. I mean, it's just the biggest entertainment programme in the world, right?
Well done, Mike.
Thank
but,
you. I knew you'd feel like congratulating me. I mean, that was about as bad a congratulatory remark as I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, I'm very proud of you, Mike.
Thank
you. You've managed to crack the other side of the Atlantic. So many people want to achieve that big moment in their career.
Oh, listen, I cracked the other side of the Atlantic 30, 40 years ago. Don't worry about that. You know.
I don't think I ever will. But what I will say
They'd love you over there, Rupert. You must be joking.
The issue is, I think, that Meghan's programme, we've now got to watch another second series of the cooking programme.
Oh.
But if this, she's going to be trying to say how to make a business grow. And obviously with her as ever brand, she's trying to bring a business. But at the moment, it feels like there is no business to grow at the moment.
I mean, I was going to say, is she not more of an expert in making a business shrink?
Well, that's what she's done so far. But, how much jam is she going to sell to turn it into a profit? And where's this jam being made? Where are the, brand people behind the scenes sort of making sure whatever she's selling is there in the kind of stock that she says she might?
Yeah.
Look, some supermarkets have said there's been a spike in, I don't know, dried flowers. Because people are now sprinkling dried flowers on their food or whatever. So there may be some movement because she does create a degree of interest. And you can't deny that. But unfortunately, the content is extremely dull.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you where you can find some really interesting content, and that is at the Political Asylum. I don't know whether you've seen this, which is going out, I think, very shortly on our esteemed channel. This is one of our colleagues doing Meghan.
Welcome to my beautiful home. What do you mean it's not my home? Every morning I pick beautiful flowers from my beautiful garden and I feed them to my beautiful children. So what if you haven't got a garden? I haven't really got any children. I hate bees. Get me out of this bee suit now. I've always loved taking something pretty ordinary and elevating it. You know, like my husband. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle because it's Meghan Sussex now. It's Meghan Sussex. Meghan Sussex. Meghan Sussex.
I'm not sure what to make of that, really. I think that's how Kevin dresses when he goes out on Hampstead Heath at the weekends.
Well, it's an interesting look. But anyway, I have to say, having given up 8 hours of my life to watch that, I'm so glad I've been at Cheltenham all week. And It's been a pleasant distraction until I got a call last night that dear Uncle Mike wanted to talk to me because we got the Gold Cup today.
Yes.
And that is, we could have a bit of sporting history because I'll be calling the race live on TalkSport later on this afternoon. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions actually for you about Cheltenham. It's a great picture, which I think we can see, of people being incredibly British and innovative in the way that they managed to smuggle drinking containers into the meeting. Because there's a woman drinking out of what looks like a pair of binoculars, and another one drinking out of what looks like a hairbrush.
Well, you've got to be creative when you come to Cheltenham. I've
only ever been in a box. I've never had to smuggle anything in.
Well, get down with the people, Mike. It's quite an experience at Cheltenham. It's great fun, this meeting. They've been talking about the crowds down, but actually it's made it pleasant. And today there will be a pretty decent crowd, maybe 60-odd thousand. That's what they want to cap the numbers up. And hopefully later on I'll be maybe calling home a bit of racing history with Galopin Deschamps winning the race for a third time in a row.
I was going to say, are you allowed to make a recommendation if those people who wish to gamble responsibly wish to gamble responsibly?
Well, I think so. You've done your bit. I like the look of each way Corbett's Cross in the race.
Okay.
Maybe in a forecast with Galopin Deschamps. But it's been a fun week, and I'm looking forward to my bed tonight because at my age I shouldn't be burning the candle at both ends.
No, I'm sure you shouldn't, but you carry on. Thank you very much indeed. Rupert Bell, TalkSport correspondent, live at Cheltenham. Listen to his commentary, calling it live, the Cheltenham Gold Cup, right here this afternoon on our sister station, TalkSport. Let's get a voice note from Ian.
Hi, Mike. It's Ian from East Grinstead. Talking about this litter problem, it's all down to how the parents are bringing up the kids. I never forget, I was sitting at some traffic lights and there was a car opposite coming the other way, a convertible car with two overweight people in the front, being mum and dad, and an overweight kid at the back. And the overweight kid in the back just finished scoffing a bag of crisps, and all he did was throw the crisp packet out the top of the car, so it just fell onto the road. And you looked at the parents, you thought, you know what, they saw it happen. They didn't say anything to the kid. You are what your parents make you.
Yeah, totally true. It's absolutely unbelievable that parents even allowed that sort of thing to happen. It's incredible, isn't it? Ian, thanks very much indeed. Coming up, we'll do a little look ahead to Plank of the Week. We'll take a couple of calls, perhaps, and loads more of your messages, which we haven't got to yet. It's all brilliant stuff. This is Morning Glory. We'll be back after this.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:53. Alex Phillips will be here coming up after 10 o'clock. She'll be here just before that to tell us what's going on. Susan says, Ray, the case of the Ghanaian who was deported and has now been let back in because he was depressed. Well, it depresses me that he's been let back in. And one from Neil who says, Mike, listening to Robert Jenrick, and I agree with him totally with respect to leaving the ECHR, but do we really believe anything will change? Isn't the issue with the activist judges who would still be there? Yeah, but they constantly use the clause in the Convention on Human Rights about the right to family life. So if we didn't have that clause, presumably the right to family life would no longer be something they could rely on to make it possible for people to stay here. Let's get a voice note from Kelvin.
Morning, Mike. People have lost interest in the country, you know, and quite rightly, because nobody else is giving a monkeys about the country. You're letting all these migrants in. You know, they take them to the streets, and you've only got to go to the areas where they're all camping out and look at the state of all that lot.
Yeah.
You know, and and look at all the areas where you'll find all the rubbish on the streets. Look at the people that live there. But you know, I bet they're overrun with migrants and people like that. You know, and people are too frightened to say anything about them. Well, I'm not. You know, the country's in a mess. You know, not just because of Brits not doing whatever and losing the love. You know, it's a government. It should start at the top.
Yeah, absolutely right. It should start at the top, and I think local councils can play some part. Certainly the government could play some part. The police could play some part. You know, there's something wrong with everything in Britain right now, and it's not impossible to fix, but it just needs the will that people should have to fix it. And we've already seen from all of the great pictures that you've been sending in to us over the course of the last couple of days that you care about what goes on around your community, and you do care what it looks like. You do care that it looks messy and horrible and grubby and filthy, and that it's rat infested. You care. So let's make it happen somehow. One here from Kelly who says, Mike, hoping you're well. I've become addicted to listening to Talk Radio. Just wanted to send you this photo from this morning. Fly tipping near a park in Hillingdon. Absolutely disgusting. Yeah, and it really is. Dreadful. And Mark says this, morning glory, we got our water rates bill this morning. It was supposed to be increasing by 55% over 4 years. It's gone up 55% this year. So that'll be 0% rise over the next 3 years, I suppose. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. That's unbelievable, isn't it? Outrageous that water can cost as much money. I always say to people, it falls from the sky for free. How do they get away with charging so much for it? Let's talk to Miranda. She's got an NHS story for me, I think. Miranda, very good morning.
Hello, I was just wanting to say that with regards to this NHS England,
yes,
it was called another name prior to being called NHS England. So all they're going to do is they'll change the name again. They'll be reinstalled back. So, so some people will take redundancies, which would be absolutely massive.
Right.
And it's just a massive con, and I'm not quite sure why the government thinks that everybody to believe what it says.
I know. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Nobody believes a word they say now because everything they say, it doesn't turn out to be true.
No, it doesn't, and it's I mean, I know people who are on they predominantly work from home. I mean, obviously some of the jobs are quite obviously very responsible jobs.
Right.
But essentially they can earn like 50 grand only working a few days a week. It's just ridiculous.
It is. It's bonkers, and nobody supervises them either, Miranda. Listen, thank you very much indeed for that, and good call to finish up the show with. Alex Phillips is here. Very good morning to you.
Hello.
Just going to play a quick promo for Plank of the Week, which you happen to be on. So hopefully you might be on the promo as well. Let's have a look. Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humsley Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
We do have some laughs, don't we?
We do have some japes, don't we? Japes and jokes.
It's been a funny day today. I've thought this is the picture of the day. I don't know whether you've seen this. The Great British Ingenuity is what I call it. There's a woman drinking out of a hairbrush. There's another woman drinking out of a pair of binoculars. Because you're not allowed to take flasks in to Cheltenham.
Oh my God, do you want to know what?
So that's what I call proper, ingenuity.
Do you know what my mate Belinda and I did once at a concert?
I know Belinda, your mate Belinda.
My mate Belinda.
Yeah.
So we came up with a genius idea of how to save money going to an outdoor concert.
Right.
And we got Ziploc bags, Ziploc bags, 2 each, filled them with vodka and put them down the back of our trousers like butt implants.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you just sort of scoop the vodka out.
Well, then all we needed to do was go and buy a Coca-Cola, something like that, and you can. But honestly, we had our
now you're giving people ideas.
Because when they do this